All right, what's up, everyone? MK Tom Brady here. In this podcast here, it's an interesting story. So a lot of you know about Mortal Kombat and the arcades, etc. What you don't realize is there was a time when Mortal Kombat and arcades were done, and everything was going to the console era, and MK was pretty much struggling to kind of stay afloat. I'm joined now by somebody who not only rebirthed Mortal Kombat, but also helped create the modern scene we have today because he simply would not let Mortal Kombat die. I am joined by the one and only Shock. Shock, how's it going tonight?
It's going good. How have you been? I haven't talked to you in a while.
I've been excellent, man. So I want to. So MK was a big thing in the arcade. Did you play it in the arcade? What was your first experience with Mortal Kombat in general, like in the arcade scene?
So my very first time playing a Mortal Kombat game was on Sega Genesis when it came out. I heard about it. I didn't get to play it in the arcades until after that, but I was hanging out with some friends. We were at the park. We came back to my house, and the one guy was like, one kid, he's like, "Oh man, I got this new game. It's like Street Fighter, but it's like real people." And I like didn't make any sense to me. I had known about like Pit Fighter and stuff, so I thought maybe it was kind of like that. Um, and then he was like, "Yeah, there's this giant like dragon guy with four arms, and there's this guy that shoots electricity, and they kill each other and stuff." Well, to me, this is just like, whoa, like what is going on here? This is nuts. So we all went to his house. I played it, and I was like, "This is terrible. Like, this is such an awful, awful game."
Which
Because it was
Mortal Kombat was it that you played
Mortal Kombat One. Mortal Kombat One. It was
for Sega
right
Genesis?
for Sega Genesis, right when it came out for the console. So it was probably about a little less than a year, I guess, after it came out in the arcade. And I realized that I had seen it in the arcade and didn't know what it was. It just didn't interest me. Again, I was a Street Fighter kid, and I also like playing like all the other arcade games, but like just kind of getting into fighting games probably around like 91, 92. Um, so I then came across it at like the boardwalks, and then there was a laundromat that my mother used to go to, and I would play it there, and there was nobody ever there. So like I got like to practice all the time, like once a week, just playing a couple hours of MK, and I started to like get into it a little bit, and then I like rented it for Super Nintendo. Somebody told me actually that's it was in between. Somebody said I was talking about it, and they're like, "Oh no, it's not that bad. Try it on Super Nintendo." They were like, "There's no blood, but it looks and sounds a lot better than the Genesis version." So I was like, "Well, that makes sense to me because I already knew that from other games, typically." So that was my very first experience, though, was playing it at a friend's house on Genesis. So that was like '93, I guess.
So I talked about this on the podcast with Jimmy, and it seems like most people kind of got into Mortal Kombat with Mortal Kombat One on the console. Then they went to the arcade only to find out that Mortal Kombat 2 was released. Is this kind of your experience?
So my first experience with MK2, I had heard that it was coming out, but I didn't know like what the details were on that. I wasn't anticipating it. So I rented. It had to be like maybe like Hyper Fighting for Super Nintendo. I was at a video store, and I walked in, and I knew the owner. I was a little kid, and he was like a community organizer, I guess you could say. He was like a boys and girls club person. He was very in tune with like the neighborhood kids and like keeping them out of trouble and stuff like that. So he knew all of us growing up because we all played at the arcades. In the video store, so I walked right in, and he like knew right away. He's like, "Oh, here's Street Fighter," And as I'm at the counter, I guess like my mother or whatever was out in the car. Uh, all of a sudden, I hear the fatality sound, and I hear the punch and the scream, and I turn around, and Jax goes off the pit, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And that was what turned me into an MK fan. At that point, it was like mind blowing because it looked so good. Like the game, I sat there and like watched like the credits and everything. The sorry the attract mode scenes, and just was like, this is unbelievable. So that was the clincher there. So whenever, I guess it must have been roughly around the same time, but it was definitely a little bit after the MK1 Genesis port was released, was when I really was like, okay, this is like something. This is like, as a kid, you're like you pick up on things that like this is going to be huge. Like this is unbelievable. Little do we know, 25 years later, here we are.
Yeah, but you as far as the competitive scene goes, you weren't really active at that point, right?
Very, very rarely. I actually don't think I played anyone in MK2 in the arcade until after 3 came out.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So for those who don't know, Mortal Kombat, MK1, MK2, MK3 comes out in the arcades, then comes UMK3, then MK4. Mortal Kombat goes through this period to which a lot of other fighting games are having really good console releases. Mortal Kombat, nada. Unless you have an arcade cabinet strapped to your back, Mortal Kombat was not the classic arcade MKs were not able to translate to the console very, very well at that point. Um, so especially MK, I mean, at least opposed to how Capcom did like a game like Alpha or etc. compared to like MK4 on the N64, they're not really the same type of quality of port. Um, so Mortal Kombat people really struggle to kind of find that arcade quality port, but I think a lot of other fighting games had that more so than Mortal Kombat did. When you really first started taking Mortal Kombat seriously, I believe that was UMK3. Who or what got you into the game? Take us through that.
So, I mean, you had like PlayStation versions of like Alpha 3 and stuff that were like okay. But yeah, we were really, I mean, really shafted by the like just inability of the systems. Even PlayStation like trilogy is only about, I mean, 85%, I would say, arcade perfect. Not in terms of gameplay, it's very close in gameplay, but like overall presentation, about 85%.
Okay, so when did you start taking it seriously as a competitor though? UMK3, correct?
So okay, so MK2 on the console. Um, I had a handful of friends and my friends' older brothers. We all played pretty regularly, and my best friend's older brothers were, for the time, pretty good players. Like overall, just gamers. They were pretty good because they were about like maybe like 6 or 7 years older than me. So they already had like that like killer instinct in them, like in their like late teens. Um, they showed me like how to actually like study people and play. And then like the lesser players that I could like mop up all the time, they kind of got tired of it. They may have played me like a little bit here and there in the arcades, but not too much. So really, I was waiting for MK3 to be released in the arcade. That was like I guess I was in like eighth grade, and I remember getting like the game magazines, and I was like drawing up sketches with one of my best friends. We were just like, "This is going to be awesome," because we thought it was like going to be really like fast paced and aggressive, and it was. Um, I was decent at three. I had another guy who was older, probably about the same age as my friend's brothers, who was definitely very, very good at fighting games, and he was the one who like honed everything. Like he brought everything together, and
But at
he
that age, like eighth grade, there's only so much you can do. You can't travel, you
exactly,
can't drive. You know what I
exactly.
mean? You're very
So
limited.
So I was stuck at that video store, and I shouldn't say stuck because there were people who came through there, and like kids would like by the time UMK3 came out, there were kids who would come into that arcade and have a stack of quarters to play against me. They'd be like, "I'm gonna beat you today," and they would go through all those quarters and they'd never win because they just didn't realize that there was another level above them at the time, and they really all thought that they were these like hotshot gamers. Like I remember when Marvel superheroes came out, one of my friends at the time was just like, "This is gonna be my game, like UMK3 is your game," and uh, nope, I beat him in that too because that's just what I did. I fighting games were something I really got into, but yeah, the MK3 to UMK3 is where I really, really learned. So I was like 14, I guess, at the time. And when the one guy who trained me in MK3 in the arcade, he left for Tekken. I think Tekken had just come out at the time. If that sounds right. He came
Tekken 2,
back.
I believe.
Tekken 2. Okay, so he came back after UMK3 was out for a little while, and it had to have been out for a little while because the video store that I played all these fighting games at, they didn't get first dibs for the local vendors because they only had like two or three machines. So like the boardwalks and the malls and stuff like that, they all got the new releases immediately. So he'd have to kind of like put in a request, and then if it would get like cycled out of another arcade, that vendor would bring it to him. So maybe it was a few months after UMK3 came out, he got it there, and that other guy came back, and he couldn't beat me anymore in three. So I had leveled up in the time that he was gone playing Tekken. because we didn't have a Tekken machine at that arcade. It was like, I think it was Marvel and Marvel superheroes and UMK3 at the time.
All right, so let's fast forward here to now you're older, say more modern era, 99, 2000, etc. Back when MK was kind of like at its downside. It was pretty much like on a down note, right? Talk to me about what got you to get to the point where you wanted to start taking the game a little more serious at that point, because it's kind of weird. The game had kind of died down.
Yeah.
There was no real arcade scene anymore. Everything was transitioning over to the home consoles. So, what made you get back into the game at that point that you wanted to start literally breathing life back into it? Like, what happened?
So I never stopped playing because Trilogy on PlayStation. I had a very good friend who also helped like usher in the arcade. Sorry, the FGC like Rebirth. He a lifelong friend. I've known him since like 1987. He and I played Trilogy literally like every summer. Like even like after he went to college, so we it was like 99. So like 99, 2000, we played Trilogy every day while he was home for the summer, and it was probably around like probably like spring of 2000 when I met somebody who links the two of us, the Prophet, Ryan Hutnick. Now, he is the reason why I even knew that there were tournaments at all, because he was already playing. He was a couple years older, so he was able to travel, a little bit before me and go to like mall tournaments. And he was talking to me at work one day about Mortal Kombat and how good he was at Trilogy. So my antennas went up. I was like, oh, let's see. And it turned out, yeah, he was definitely better than I was, and he helped level me up to that initial um, point where I could say, like, you know what? Let's see if we can get people to play this, and in fact, let's see if there's any way we can, even get a tournament for it. Big E, NEC2 puts up advertisement on Shoryuken, and there it is, UMK3, and we're like, oh my god, like here we go. This is our chance to go out and see if there's anybody who can play this. And that was where it all started. So that was in 2001, and that's when I met you in Philly at University Pinball.
Yeah, I remember Ryan very well. He came a lot, mainly doing regular MK3 to Menlo, and I would see him when I would go out to, I believe it was Freehold, correct, that he would play at, if I
Freehold
remember
Mall.
correct. And I would see him, it was very crew based at that time with the Menlo crew, or, my friends from the break would go out to Freehold. We would always see him there playing. Not as much during UMK3, but during the regular MK3, he was there like all the time.
Yeah, he
Um,
might actually been playing Tekken during UMK3 alone.
might have been. So he got you. So okay, obviously you're playing somebody. You're still playing your friends, but when you play that guy that you're like, oh, okay, this guy is taking the game to a new level. That kind of gets you
Yeah,
your competitive juices going again. And now you have this newfound love where, okay, now I need to kind of step my game up. And this is just love of the game, right? There's no
that's
tournaments
it.
at this time, nothing. It's just you two friends who,
Continuing to play Trilogy. That was
because you
literally,
love the game.
yep. No other reason. I literally he came over my house. Oh no, sorry. I went over his house, and he's like, "Okay, if you can beat my brother, then I'll play you." That was like that's how it was. Like in the arcade, if you can beat my friend, then you can play me. So I mopped his brother, and he was like, "Okay, all right. So you know what you're doing." And he probably beat me 10-1 easily ratio. However many matches we played, I'd never been beaten like that in the UMK3 era. I mean
But
it
this
was
is your first
very,
exposure
very
to an actual like
a
competitive
real
player for that
pro,
time.
not pro, but like a real like
Competitive player, yes.
competitive
A
player.
tournament
Exactly.
player, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Because he had experience for MK4. I want to say he played in some tournaments. I mean, I don't know if he played in others, but his parents were very supportive of him when it came to the competitive gaming, and they made sure that he could attend events and everything. It was that was something that I mean I don't think that I don't think that my mother, maybe my grandparents, but I don't think my mother would be like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to take you to an arcade to go, play people for money." I don't think that would have been in her wheelhouse. I wasn't even thinking about anything like that until I was already, I was like 19 when I met him. So, was working and, could get around, and that was it.
Okay, so I remember those UP tournaments. I was mainly going there for Tekken 4, and there were a lot. They would hold tournaments in just about any game that was a fighting game. There was a
Yep.
tournament for.
They had a cabinet. They would run it.
But of course, like the modern era, as things begin to transition from the arcade days to the console era, then we saw kind of the groundwork of what we would consider the modern tournament scene today, where hotel renting out a conference room, sometimes multiple conference rooms, and setting everything up on the console, and then all of a sudden, this is where Mortal Kombat UMK3 came in jeopardy because no longer was there this cabinet there for people to play on.
Yep.
You and Prophet started showing up there with, I believe, the PlayStation version of Trilogy. I think. Talk to us about that.
So the first time we ran a tournament for Big E. So real quick to get us up to the point where he was like having us run stuff. We were showing up to his events at University Pinball, which he had a few events. Like basically, NEC was the main event. He did like a March Madness event, which eventually became Winter Brawl. It was around the same time. And he did have a Summer Jam event. I remember very early on in me attending his tournaments. That was probably like '02. But I do remember going to University Pinball several times, and he saw us there every time. By like the third time, he knew who we were because we were the MK guys. That first tournament NEC2 that I went to, there were a handful of people. You don't walk into an arcade at that point and have a dozen people playing UMK3. This is a tournament. There's 100, 100, 200 people there. You're going to have some, guys who are interested in that. And then it was done after that. It was like nothing. It was like that last hurrah. It was like, oh yeah, we're going to bring this game back. And not that he wasn't advertising it, but it was just like, that was it. It was me, Ryan, Julian Robinson, who's a local guy. That's the only reason he was there is that was where he played. So it wasn't really going to attract anybody because it was just already several years dead. So he eventually asked us to promote and maybe start running events because we weren't at University Pinball anymore. We were doing it out of this hotel off of Penrose Avenue in Philly. We had to figure out a way to get something, and honestly, like computers at the time were still not capable of emulating the MK arcade games yet. It was just the way that those games are programmed is so just off the wall, like hardware. It really is just not optimized. Like Capcom games were, I guess, getting a little more a little more TLC when it came to like decryption and emulation. It was CPS2 was just easier to emulate, similar to like the Neo Geo hardware. So we were stuck with running, which the only thing we really could was PlayStation, and we didn't have sticks. I did have that like Hori or like Samwa knockoff, the Blaze. You remember that one? It was
Yeah, I
that
remember.
that big double-sided arcade stick. It was, at least it was a stick, but it wasn't great. But eventually by like '04, I think we had a computer. We had like an AMD that could run the game full speed, and we brought this big ass CRT, like a 24-inch Sony. It was really nice, and it had, I think we used S video, and so like the quality was better than just like RCA or whatever. But yeah, so we started doing that, and then we started getting the sticks. So like by like '05, we had a full setup. We had like PlayStation controllers, arcade sticks, a keyboard. Everything was just as we have it now. When I bring it to an event and I do a stream for like MK11, it's just the setup that we had is just like in the mix of all the stuff that's going on during the event.
Okay, let's talk about that. So, going back to the sticks you brought up. So, one of the problems that Mortal Kombat ran into when holding tournaments on the PlayStation was pretty much every fighting game out there ran on a standard 4, like Tekken, or 6-button layout. Mortal Kombat's MK3 slash UMK3, which you were running on Trilogy, uses the 5-button format where it's the 5 pretty much spread out like your hand kind of format, and then the run button down by your thumb. And there were no sticks that were manufactured like this because MK was the only game that kind of used its own button layout out of all the competitive fighters.
Yeah.
So this caused a lot of problems early on. Now you were running these tournaments at any. Usually it was just NEC originally because Big E was just doing NEC at this point. It hadn't really evolved yet to like the plethora of Northeast tournaments that it is now. Back in the day, so NEC was one of the big ones, or the big one in that area. And you bring your PlayStation and Trilogy, and you're trying to recruit some players. Now, you eventually started to get like a crew, like a local crew in New Jersey, and kind of get players to want to kind of play who maybe not had tried it out before. Talk to us about some of the Jersey guys that you had that started to play the game, who started to travel out to these tournaments. Because originally, when I was there, it was just you and Profit. Then every time out next tournament, there's always somebody else, and it slowly began to grow. Every time I saw you, there were more and more players that were turning out for these trilogy tournaments. Talk to me about that. Who are these guys? Where did you find them? How did they get into the game, etc.?
Yeah. So what happened was the trilogy thing didn't really last too long. We did that for like a year, and then I guess it was around '04 was when I started going to the breaks. That's where I started meeting these other players. So the first guy that really like reached out to me online to like say, hey, come to this event. I do, I run, tournaments at this place called Eight on the Break. I was like, okay, cool. So we went out there to, I think it was East Coast Championships 9, I believe was in 2004. And one of the TOs there was this guy, Jet Fee, who absolutely loved UMK3. He was a Sonya player. He was, pretty solid. And I didn't know him. And that, like, he had messaged me, but like, I wouldn't know him if I saw him. So I walk in, and there's a guy playing UMK3. I walk up, I play him, and I don't know. I guess I must have been smoke or something like that. And then after the first round, he looks at me. He goes, "You're shocked, right?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like, "You fee?" And he's like, "Yep." And he's like, "Oh, cool." So introduce each other, and from there, we started seeing like the snowball effect, where you get these people who show up, and then they're around for a little while, and maybe it's not your thing, or something else better comes up in life and you move on. But you had I would say more Long Island guys than anything, but you had like this let's see, so you had like um who's Rob Sigley. He is a like a CVS2 player but loved UMK3. He played Jade. He had his own little style to him, and he like would pop up here and there. So he was a Jersey guy, and then you had John Vence, I believe his last name is. He went by Red Goki, if I remember correctly. And this other guy, whose name is Guy, they were like the crew of local Jersey guys who all came to the break like every time I would run something. And then not even like a major tournament. I would just like post something on like a board, be like, hey, I'm going to be at the break this weekend. Whoever wants to show up, we're going to run some, UMK3 sessions. And then that's when the Long Island guys started showing up. So that was like the next bridge from, starting out with doing these Philly tournaments to taking over running the MK section of the event, which again was very tiny, to running tournaments at the break on an arcade cabinet, and that just felt like home. Like that was like to me like the real home of the Rebirth was at the break running these little tournaments with basically like Philly, Philly, Long Island, and New Jersey.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the break. I many late nights I spent there back in the arcade days.
Yeah. Now, were
The
you there in the '90s?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
All the break weeklies for MK3, man.
Man,
Uh,
I wish I knew, dude. I was I like I said, 2004 was I didn't even know the break existed until then. So like that's like really late in the game, which is it's unfortunate, but um, there was like a few other guys who were just like kind of like on their way out at the time. Um, but yeah, so then I guess like next it moves to like the Long Island era. I don't know if you want to add anything to that before
yeah,
I get to
okay,
that.
so yeah, so this is the thing. So around this time, well, before we get into the forums, At what point did you realize perhaps you were just starting to possibly advance the game past where it was played in 95, 96, etc.?
So, all right, I thought that by like the end of the '90s, I figured like, okay, I already had like an understanding that all I was doing was meeting random people, not necessarily people who are any good, but you could get an idea of how people thought they were as players by how they acted and how they reacted when they would lose. So I kind of thought like, because I would make people angry, that I had to be pretty good if people were getting mad at losing because they probably thought they were good and they realized they couldn't beat me. And like beating people who have like a certain certain behavior. Like I described this one particular instance in Atlantic City where I came into the arcade and it's dead because it's like probably 1996 and people are playing UMK3. So I was like, oh, good. At least there's somebody I could play in UMK3, and it's these two guys. And I play the first guy, and the other guy's like smoking a cigarette, and he's like hanging on the side of the machine. And I beat the first guy, but he was good. Like this guy played better than probably any person I had played previously. And again, I'm 15 years old, limited overall experience, but I still went around and played people. Then the other guy like pushes the guy off the machine and is like, "I'm gonna beat this guy." Like that kind of puts a cigarette on the cabinet and gets serious. Kind of like how you see the meme where you got the gamer like laying back and then it's got like the shadow of the player leaning forward, like
Yeah.
I'm serious. But it was like this is a different person. Uh, and then I beat that guy, and I was like, wasn't really sure what was going to happen. They were older, and I was just like, okay. I was like, what's going to happen next? Because you never know. I never had any altercations in the arcades, but you never know. So we played back and forth. I really don't remember if they beat me at all, but they were definitely like a challenge that like pushed me in the moment up. Like, oh, I have to like play seriously because the only other person that I ever played was you're probably familiar with Dreamer NJ. I know you've met him over the years.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, he was the only guy who ever really gave me a challenge other than the Prophet in the UMK3 trilogy era.
So when you
And I
went to AC, so you basically you played maybe not at the highest level, but you saw what the game was about when you were like
yes,
15, and
yeah.
now that you're older and you're playing it, you kind of have this sense of, all right, this is definitely going beyond where I saw the game being played 4 and 5 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, the game has been completely like dissected now to the point where it's it's very what would you say, like there's like games where like take like Marvel 2 for example. There's a certain way that you formulate a team, and there's only a handful of characters in the game, and if you're watching a tournament, that's pretty much all it's going to be. It I mean, people would say it was all Cabal and Human Smoke. I think that from like 2001 to like 2010, you saw a little bit more variety because a lot of those players who like glommed on to those two, like they weren't really around. Like another example is like you'd always hear Kano was this great character, but people were playing online not using Kano, but people come back from the 90s and show up with a Kano, and then oh my god, this player made top four and nobody knows who they are, but they play Kano because they know that this character is actually very good, even though you're not going to see that character used online. So again, like now we're getting into like the online stuff. um,
Yeah, before we get to the online stuff, so
yeah, yeah.
very quickly, uh,
So
so
yeah,
I in my opinion, one of the differences is just because of the way that things technology makes everything better. When the arcade in the arcade era, you know, you're paying for every game,
hmm
and you're not going to pay $20 just to try to test something. I mean, it is what it is, right? You
some
might
people would,
test a few
some people
things,
would.
nobody
Yeah.
would, right? So you're
Jim,
playing people,
Jimmy and
but
summoning maybe,
maybe, but outside of that, probably not. And
especially not teenagers.
now here it is, not just console, but now you're emulating it on the PC. So you're able to experiment quite a bit, and the level now begins to raise, or
Oh, big time.
the game begins to change from where it was to where it's going.
I can tell you exactly what it is.
Good.
So the I guess the only way you could really practice before was like trilogy. Um, but that is extremely like tedious and annoying to train on that game. When you could train on an emulator on the arcade, now you have the unlimited ability to optimize combo damage. And I remember having arguments with Lex on Shoryuken about like the potential for combos, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this guy's like supposed to be the best, and it's been many years since he was playing competitively, and he don't even know, you could do X, Y, or Z in the game. And it got me thinking, like, they didn't explore combos because maybe they were just all tactics, which to me is like, yeah, sure, you can win with all tactics, but man, you scare somebody anytime they leave the ground, they're going to take 80% damage. You don't need all those tactics all the time because that's it's
Yeah,
dangerous.
damage is a great equalizer. Absolutely.
Exactly. For a player like me, because like I mean, my execution is okay. I mean, I drop combos here and there, but it's a difference maker to somebody who is specifically just going for setups and traps and is opting for like standing high kick punishes just so like they can maybe hit you again off a jump because that's what they enjoy doing. That some players are just like that. They're like, oh, I'll hit you with 8 high kicks instead of 2 combos. But so that to me was the real difference maker, and that's when we started releasing combo videos, and getting a lot of flack for it. Everybody's calling, oh, this is WWE stuff. The other character's not, the other player's not even challenging. I was like, these are exhibitions, you dopes. Like, this is to show people what you can do in the game and maybe what you can't do in the game because it's some of the stuff was so complicated at the time. And then it just got stupid where they're like the frame manipulation and everything, and learning these oddball properties you can only like guess before we started actually like looking at the code of the game. Like you could say like, oh, it seems like this happens here, and it's like, how come this character can cancel after 5 hits but the other one can't? That we learned all that stuff, and then we found out that what we thought was right because we spent an alarming amount of time cumulatively between everybody just figuring this stuff out because for whatever reason we just love these games. And instead of like playing poker or something like that, it's like, this is what we do.
All right, so you brought up Lex really quick, and this is where I want to go. It's a good segue. Who was one of the testers on UMK3? So at this point, you're on Shoryuken, you're posting. They had forums, side forums for other games, not just Capcom games, and you're talking about Mortal Kombat 3, UMK3, posting tech, posting videos, reaching out, reaching more players than just locally. Now you have a bigger outreach on the forums, which is something you didn't have in the 90s, a centralized online location, which now we have. And you doing a lot of this kind of got the interest of some of the testers. Talk about how you first started to come to know some of the UMK3 testers. What was your initial interaction with them online? What were the conversations like, etc.?
So real quick, Lex, did he actually test UMK3, or was he? I thought he was a WaveNet refit guy, and I thought he tested MK4.
He was the mid UMK3, I believe.
Okay, okay,
He
okay.
was
That
more
makes
WaveNet, mid
yeah.
UMK3, so more WaveNet and MK4.
Okay, so that makes sense. All right, so like pre-trilogy, but like towards the end. So okay. Uh, I first discovered who Lex was. Prophet came into work one day and was like, "Oh my God, he's like one of the UMK3." Like, he might have said tester. I think that's what he said. Like, one of the UMK3 testers is like spilling like all the secrets of like everything that he knows. He's posting this uh like compendium on the Shoryuken, and
Yes, the thread. Lex is UM,
yeah,
and to be fair, at that point in time, guys like him were rightfully so considered one of the best players in the
yeah,
world in the game.
almost authority basically.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And he was releasing stuff. Now, so what happened was I'm reading through the thread, and I'm immediately seeing discrepancies. I was like, what is this guy talking about? Like some of the things he had was like very very intricate and very valuable at the time, but there were some really like inarguable things that he had on it that I was just like, how can a guy who like is so good not know this, that, or the other thing? And uh, me being a little more jerky, I guess you could say. I was only like what 21. Um, I just start coming at him, and I just start calling him out on stuff like that, and which is probably disrespectful, but it's he's posting stuff that's not true. So I was like, I gotta,
I mean,
you
but
know,
in fairness, I understand. But it's kind of like you were more modern era. You had more. While they were a tester, you had more access as far as like now you could actually break the game down into the code. When you're QA, you don't normally get into that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So you're coming
I
from no. Look, let me tell you what we found. This
yeah.
is
See,
someone who was legitimately. I mean, at the time, he was legitimately one of the best players in the world. Like
yeah,
not
no,
hyperbole. Like you know
yep.
what I mean. So
No, I just looked at it from the perspective of like this guy played competitively, and I'm learning the stuff now, uh, without any of his knowledge. Like I know nothing from him mattered in terms of what I knew at the time because I didn't know him at all. I never saw him post anything, so I'm reading all this information. So it'll be like katana, and it would be like, don't do this, best combo, blah blah blah, pretty basic stuff, which I actually used. He must have done like maybe 10 characters by the time he just like stopped, I guess, because he kind of got tired of like being derailed. Um, but I coordinated with him after the fact when I eventually made my own site, to use his guides as the basis of like a master guide for the whole game at the time. This is 2006 when I did that. Um, and I spent, a large amount of time like getting the wording perfect and like uh editing and just cultivating everything from him and all these other players who had ever been involved in anything, the Chicago guys, Philly guys, put everything together and then release this massive guide like character by character on you know Mortal Kombat Online, or it was still MK5.org at the time. It was like
it was
Mortal
MK5.org. You're one of the only people who actually remembers how far back. It was actually MK Nightmares, and then it became
I didn't know it then. Okay.
yeah, and then it became MK5.org. And then
Yes.
this is before it was even in Mortal Kombat Online. And when it was back
Yep.
MK5.org.
Yep. Because Deadly Alliance, I think, was just about to be released, and they
MK5, yeah, they changed it MK5.org. So you're, but at a certain point, so here you are learning from guys like Lex, who, I think everyone would agree was one of the best players in the world at the time.
absolutely.
And then it went from a learning experience to a kind of competitive banter there, and it began to heat up a little bit as to, wait a minute, maybe this way is no longer the best way to play the game. The game is changing quite a bit. Talk us through that. Like, how did it go from where it was to now it's starting to become competitive?
Yeah. So it basically went from Lex's guide was his announcing his retirement from competitive play. It was like a soft way of saying like he's done with the game. I'm going to tell everybody everything I know, and that's going to be it. So I think what happened was, because the Prophet and I were like really aggressive about getting the game back, and he clearly didn't want the game to come back. He wanted to be like known as forever the best UMK3 player. He was absolutely having no part of it, and all of his buddies would like jump on me and the Prophet every time we'd post something. We don't know what we're doing. We post like our match videos. You guys would get destroyed by Chicago. I remember Jason Wilson saying he would be able to beat me only using Liu Kang's bicycle kick.
Dream TR, man, the god
And
himself, man.
and it continued. This went for like 2 or 3 years, and here's the thing: I didn't know that Lex came to New Jersey in 2008 at the break. I didn't know that. I don't remember him posting about that. It would have been nice because I would have been able to go out there and play him then, which would have been 2 years before I actually did, which was at East Coast
He did. He
Championship.
came. I hung out with him. He came and he played. It was really cool. We hung out. We hung out. Obviously he was an amazing player. Which obviously, when you're that good, there's always a certain level that you retain.
Yep. Mutual
By
respect.
buddies, you mean? So let me just say, call who these guys are. Dream TR, which is Jason Wilson, universally recognized as probably to this day the greatest Mortal Kombat 2 player of all time. I don't think many. I mean, you talk to summoning quite a bit. Even summoning will tell you he was the best
I don't know how much he knows about him, but
at that time. I'm not talking about where the games have been advanced
yeah,
in the modern era, but at that time, the arcade era, almost anybody would say that guy was the best.
yeah.
And Adam Hernandez, also a tester for Midway at the time. You didn't really get into it with like Ferrier and everyone else. It was just
No, he never really said
it
anything.
was Adam, Lex, and Dream TR.
And I want to say, if I remember correctly, Arturo, who was not like one of their guys, but Arturo would jump in and get on my case every now and then because he was.
Arturo is. Let me tell you. Maybe I'll do a podcast about this one day. Arturo and Spooky are one of the greatest
Yep.
promoters of all time, and they see something they can promote for the
Yep.
benefit of the FGC, and they're like, "Hey, this is good for the scene to get the
hmm
scene out there." So I think that's more kind of Arturo's capacity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
But
agree.
even like I said, these guys, for those who don't know or don't know who they are now, these guys were pretty much the who's who of Mortal Kombat. You're talking Dream TR, Lex, Adam. These are guys that were considered Mortal Kombat royalty at
Mm.
that time. Very dominant players in the arcade era. Um, and all of a sudden, so you're posting match videos and they're critiquing you like you wouldn't do good, you would get
Yeah.
destroyed if you ever came to Chicago, et cetera, et cetera.
And don't forget Mo and Thrower. Mo not so much.
No,
Thrower.
right.
Uh,
When you met those guys, they're so much different than the
oh
forum.
yeah. Hey
For
man, how's it going? No, nice to meet you.
yeah, so Mo and Thrower, not so much Mo. Mo's never been.
He's a
Yeah,
class.
Mo's never been. So you start talking, and it gets really competitive. Where does it go from there? To where did you try to arrange a meetup or whatever? I mean, because you're in Jersey and they're in Chicago. So how did this come to pass? Did you guys
So
meet
I'm
up or
pretty
whatever?
sure. I'm pretty sure there was no talk of the break, the ECC 8 tournament, which would have been '03. I think we tried to get him to come out the next year because we found that afterwards. By the way, I do have a screenshot still of the leaderboard from Lex where he has like the 34 wins, like the 27 wins, and then like there's like a couple other ones on there. I have to look that up. I'm pretty sure I still have that. Um, but the crux of everything came to ECC 10, which was 2005, where we convinced them to come out. We're gonna have a real tournament. We're gonna play. We're gonna see. You know, is this deep dish Chicago style UMK3? Is it really the be all end all? Um, I would say that the results were inconclusive. I did beat Lex in that tournament.
Who was there from Chicago?
Lex, Mo, and Thrower.
Okay, Lex and Thrower came up. Okay.
So we did a round robin. There were 9 of us. Um, Oddly enough, Jet Fee beat me in that tournament, which if he hadn't, I would have wound up tying with Lex because we both lost to different people. It was very, very strange outcome. Mo wound up winning. I think he only lost one. I think he lost one set. That was it. Um, and then it was like Lex and me and Prophet, Thrower. It was all a mix. Like the top 4 was a mix of us.
It's tough for round robin because it's not
Yeah,
bracket.
yeah,
But by score, first was Mo, second was Lex, third was you. But you did beat. It's not like they went unbeaten. So they did lose sets.
hmm
So even though they ended up by round robin, I guess by the score, you could say, listen, we still were able to take sets
exactly.
off of them.
Yeah,
But as far as the results go, Mo wins, Lex is second, you're third, fourth was who, Thrower?
Prophet, I believe.
Prophet, and then Thrower fifth, I guess.
Oh my god.
Okay, so all the top Chicago Jersey guys, but again, it's round robin. So while the 2 Chicago guys on the top, round robin format, it's kind of like, okay, well, I beat you, but it's a round robin, so it's by the score. So the
It
results
wasn't
are the
like that.
result. So it's inconclusive. Yeah.
Lex said, "This is all for fun, right?" That was what he said after he lost.
But it's kind of weird
For
that it's
fun?
round robin, right? But it's kind
He trash talked me for 2 years straight and said I wouldn't be able to beat him around. and I beat him in tournament. That's all that matters to me.
Yeah,
That's it.
of
It was
course. But again, like you said, inconclusive because it's a
yeah,
round robin.
exactly.
So
So
it doesn't have that feel like, oh, it's a bracket tournament. There's only 9 people. Somebody has to get a bye. At that point, it's just easier to,
but
yeah,
4 or 5 of the top, 5 of the top players of that period were all there. That was it. There wasn't really. I mean, there really weren't any other players. When you think about it,
yeah,
picture of all of us from the end of the night. Julian was there. So you had a few different states too, which was good. It wasn't just like it was a bunch of people from Jersey getting together and saying, "Oh, who's the best guy in their backyard?" It was people from different states, and it was a very cozy, very personal tournament. And what sucked was I had to park like a quarter mile from the building, and I think I had like 2 video cameras with me. We recorded a bunch of matches that night, which they're probably scattered about on YouTube, but they're definitely on my Ultimate MK site. We didn't get to record any matches of me and Lex, and the people, especially South America at the time, was like so heated over this because that was they. We've always been since for like 20 years, like these same guys. We are all still around. It's ridiculous, but they were so pissed that we didn't get any matches. There was this one guy who recorded a set between me and Lex, and I tried to contact him on Shoryuken at the time, but his like what's it called his inbox was full, so I couldn't get him a private message. He went by the name Jason X, and he had at least one match with me and Lex, and I was hoping that I could get that from him just to appease me. Again, this was at the time, it was, 15 years ago. Um, but it was fun. It was great to actually like for like the real first time like have like true competition. Like Julian had like a certain style about him that was annoying, but like you could definitely beat him because it wasn't his game. It wasn't his main game. He's just like a guy who played it a lot in the arcade, which says something for a person who's never really concentrated on that game to be, good enough that he could give people trouble who play it all the time. It's sort of like an Li Joe thing, where Li Joe could just like jump into a UMK tournament and like you don't know if you're going to beat him or not.
yeah,
Very,
sure,
very.
sure.
um, but that it all culminated to that point, and from there, very shortly after, the Prophet wound up passing away, and that was just like people who never met him came to his funeral. It was that like much of a bond that was made in that short a time, for about 5 years or so. He was one of the main driving forces to pull this community together. Like we started going around to like all like different sites and just hammering every single site. Like we were running tournaments. I remember contacting MK Online, and they told me like nobody cares about tournaments. We don't need to give this any attention. And I was like really disappointed by that. And that was right around when the Prophet passed, and I was like, we got to make a site in his name, and we got to get everybody together. And that to me was like the spark that began the real FGC presence. Because before that, it was this very self-important sort of group of people who were just like these like guys that like can't play each other all the time, and all we did was just argue with each other. That was basically it. And I mean, obviously, not much has changed, but it's less personal than it was then.
Yeah, I remember going to. I think the last NEC at UP was the first NEC for Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, and then after
Right.
that it was a hotel. And the initial MKDA tournaments and T4 tournaments at the hotel, the conference room kind of hotel console era. You were still on Trilogy, and then it moved to kind of like arcade. You found our cabinet at the break, and then everything kind of went there.
Yep.
And then, of course, you ended up running it on PC, and then you bought actual Mortal Kombat style joysticks so that people, who were kind of accustomed to the arcade, which were most people at that time if they were competitive.
Yeah, I don't know if there were any at all made for any like. I know there were these little companies aside from
I'll
like
say no.
us. I would say there were no MK sticks made before the Prophet's first one by Dreaded Fist. This guy from Texas. He made him a nice plexi UMK3 stick, and I'm pretty sure that's the first one ever made, at least custom.
I would agree. I hadn't seen any of them, and I remember this was the first time ever that you could play Mortal Kombat as it was played in the arcade on a arcade style joystick, and you could be playing somebody who's playing on their pad for the home console.
Yep.
Before you started doing this, there was a huge disconnect. It was, I'm an arcade player. I'm a pad guy. And either the pad guy had to play on the stick or the stick guy had to play on the pad, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody was uncomfortable.
Never ever get a definitive answer because there was always a handicap.
And I remember I hated it on Kylera. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. To this day, I can't play the game on the pad. I've always hated it.
No, terrible.
But you started doing it. So now here we have this setup. You want a pad, you can play on the pad. You want a stick, you can play on the stick. And as the console era began to grow, venues and players became bigger and bigger and bigger. You then expanded. So UMK3 was just a side game for the longest time. You would pretty much bring it, you would set it up, and you would run it on the side. You earn profit, and then obviously, unfortunately, the sad passing of Profit, which shook a lot of people because it was a guy that a lot of us came to know over the years. And then all of a sudden, UMK3 goes from this side game, and the streaming era is kicking in. Team Spooky, who I believe changed fighting games forever, the GOAT the GOAT Spooky, who pretty much changed the way fighting games will ever be seen, began streaming this. Because for those who don't know, before the streaming era even started before YouTube became big. And
Was it really streaming, or was it more like recording locally and posting?
I think originally it was recording locally and posting, but even before the local recording and posting, the way you used to have to get footage is somebody, and you know this when I went to Chicago and I would play like Lex or whoever, somebody would have to record it on a camcorder.
And you'd have to post everything.
And then you have to rip the footage, right, and post it in these large file formats that takes 2 weeks to get because God knows when you're going to get them.
I used to do it all handheld. I do a handheld camera. I'd go home. I'd record. You'd have to record it onto the computer, and then you'd go through and edit the matches up and post them. You'd have to put them up individually because you forget it. You can't put
the
a whole.
Files are too big.
Yeah.
And even for like big major tournament games, Tekken 4, etc., whatever games were being played at the time, you would pretty much, these console games, you'd have to plug a VCR and you would have your CRT and you would have to record it like you would record your Friday night show, right?
Yep.
And then you send the tape to whoever runs whatever site, and they would kind of break the footage down match by match, and they would post it up on the site over the course of several weeks. You really couldn't see what actually happened for several weeks after the event. Spooky started out by making these matches accessible very, very quickly. And then, of course, it went on to streaming. What was, you got MK3 on the main stage on these streams. What was the first time you actually got, once we go into the modern era of live streaming, what's the first time you actually got UMK3 as a main stage game live streamed to everybody at home as it happened on Spooky? Talk me through that.
Okay, so real quick, the first time it was streamed was, again, I was there running the UMK3 tournament, but the real catalyst to get it as an official game for the event, not just like Shock's going to show up with his equipment and you can play if you want. It was ECT2, which was in 2010. John Gallagher and L.I. Joe, they had it as an official game. It wasn't just like UMK3 on the side. It was like, no, this is one of our main games for the event. So it was giving it that rub off of, I guess it was Super Street Fighter 4 was out at the time. We were on in between whatever the game was before. It was probably like a Tekken or Soul Calibur, or, one of those. Maybe Marvel 3 was out at the time. And the top 8, I believe it was, for Super Street Fighter 4. And Seb was the streamer for the event. I guess it was only one stream because it wasn't, it was not really that important, I guess, at the time to have everything possible streamed. He did not want he did not want to put UMK3 on there. He didn't know anything about the game. He was like many people and just assumed that it was not a competitive game. It was going to be, just junk, like Eternal Champions or something like that for Saturn maybe. But he was he was swayed in the middle of the event because his numbers were up like 1,000 viewers. I think we started with like 3 and ended with 4 or something like that. So he didn't lose any viewership. He was very happy with that, and he also had Li Joe playing in the top 3. So it was like if you needed any more credibility to get this game attention, I don't know what could have made you do it, but there were some issues going into it. John Gallagher was like, let these guys do what they're going to do. You're going to love it. And that's where it started. But it was Road to Evo a few months later at, was it a few months? I guess it was probably like July, because I think that was May. And that's where I met Storms for the first time too, by the way, was at ECT2. He showed up for that, was blown away. He credits that event as being the reason why he made Mortal Kombat Empires into Test Your Might, and why he got really behind the whole tournament scene. And again, there was no MK9
It was
even
MK
in
United at the time. Remember, it was MKU, and he branched off. Gerchep had MKU, and then he branched off
the
and made his
Empire.
own site and made
He had
MK,
Empires.
which turned into Test Your Might.
Exactly. So, trying to wrap this all up into the first time Spooky streamed it, we were invited to Road to Evo. They wanted to have UMK3 because we were getting a build. We were starting, in probably 09, we were starting to get, consistent turnouts. That people are talking, it's maybe just in the Northeast or whatever. People are talking like, hey, these guys are at every event, and it's kind of like when you see like a side event for like Guilty Gear, or like even at the time like the Tekken and like Soul Calibur tournaments. They were not big tournaments, and we were starting to be on par with those tournaments with this dead ass game.
So before we go on, let me just bring up anyone who's watching. Let me bring listeners up to speed. We just jumped to 2010. What you don't realize is all of these Northeast majors, you are bringing the game there. 2000, 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. So now we're going on about 10 years of you going from you and Profit and nobody else, kind of like, hey, you want to try this game? And now you are at the point where you're bringing in players. People are talking about it. It's getting a lot of traction on forums.
We're hitting 24, 32 player tournaments for a dead game.
And you're plugging this away for 10 plus years. Before we get on to Spooky, because I know where this is going, because we're going on to another player who people know in the modern MK scene, who also one of their first appearances there. You then began to, so after the internet was something we didn't have a way to talk. So like someone like myself in 96, 95, I would have no way to talk to, Hanzo from South America, right? That we had no idea of each other.
Very limited.
Or even if we did, we had no way to talk to each other. Like I was aware from the late 90s that like this is South American scene. These guys are really, really good. So now not only are you building the game up from the dead, you're able to talk with people from all over the world, like Dead, Hanzo, etc.
The networking.
What was the first time you got a hold of these guys? When did you find out about them? Talk to me about those guys.
Okay, so I want to say the first time, I don't remember which one of them it was, but there was a website called Akuma Combos, I believe. This is 20 years ago. I remember there being combo videos. There was this guy, Sick Dick. Remember him? And NKI.
Sick Dick from California, correct?
I don't know where he was from, but
Raids player. I know who he is.
Okay, yeah, he had some N64 trilogy combo videos.
And KI, by the way, I'm not hating on you, Sick Dick. I know I'm trying to give you your due, buddy. I know who you are, man.
I was not that familiar with the N64 version, so like he's doing things in it. I'm like, you can't do this. I'm like, this has to be like a bugged version of the game. I was like, some of this stuff is not possible. And then I come to find out that the N64 version has some very strange programming tweaks into it. We're not still to this day not sure why. but yeah, but the
Okay.
trilogy, yeah, sorry, N64 trilogy. So I remember like just the combo videos. That's what united me, and I really don't remember who it was. I'll have to send out like an all points bulletin on this to follow up. But one of the South American players, that was where it might have been Hanzo. Um, but that's where we met up. So like, here's a guy. He's on the
By the way,
southern.
man, they're called bolos these days, man. Not APBs, man. Bolos. Be on the lookouts, man. Come on, man.
That's what it's called.
Bolos, man. Bolos. Come on, man.
so so yeah, so that was where we initially made contact, and then it moved through all those different websites, and especially like Shoryuken was where like things really started blowing up with like Ninja Grinder and a couple of the other guys, RZP. um you know
Ninja Grinder,
so, you know,
RZP. Look, all of you guys. I know
I
who all you
know
guys
it's,
are. If I leave somebody out, man, don't think I don't know who you guys are.
uh,
That I'm not like the highest respect for you guys, man.
yeah, no, we're really like
RZP, Ninja Grinder. I remember them. Yeah.
we're really like doing like flashbacks here, but we when we made ultimatemk.com, we literally like made like posts on
What
all
year
these
was
different.
that?
That was
Ultimate MK.
2006. That was 2006. Uh,
2006. Ultimate MK.
yes. So we went to all the message boards that we posted on, all of them, and we were just like against community rules or whatever. We were just like, yeah, we're done with these sites. They don't support what we're doing. Um, there's like 5 of you here, 10 of you here, 2 of you here, 3 of you here. We're making our own site. And like the first day that we opened, again, this is just classic MK fans, nobody else. Remember, you had Deadly Alliance and Deception were out at this point. Um, we were not getting any feedback from any of these players because they're the main games, so they're in their own part of the forum, unlike MK Online. So they're separate from us, but nobody's acknowledging that we're doing tournaments, so nobody's asking, hey, can we get our games out there? We just took all the classic players from all these sites and we're like, come to our site. We're done here. We're closing up shop. We had, I mean, like 1,200 users overnight. It was like maybe not specifically, but it was like within like a month we had 1,200 users of just. It's like, whoa, where did all these people come from? Um, it just the word of mouth, and I guess because of the announcement of Xbox Live, had like literally we bought the site a month before the announcement, something like that, roughly, because it was Prophet passed away, and it was almost like a month to the day where they made the announcement. It was out of the blue. We had no idea it was going to happen. So we got the website like a couple days after he passed, and then we started setting up. Dreamer and Jay and I. He started setting up like the groundwork for the forum because he didn't want to do just like a canned forum. He wanted to like have his own thing, and he spent like a month building it. And we're like, they announced it. We're like, oh, we might as well open the doors now. And then that's what helped us get all these people out of tournaments. There were people from Xbox Live coming out. Like every tournament would be like 5 people would show up, and then maybe the next tournament would be like 1 or 2 who would come back. But then you'd have like more people show up, and you get that snowball effect, and eventually you start having, 16, 24, 32 players. So now we're all the way up to Road to Evo 2010. It's me, Li Joe, and AC 1984 again. The top 3, the same top 3 from ECT. 2
AC
months.
1984. This now we're starting to go into the more modern players.
Yeah.
Where'd you meet Simon? How'd you find out about him?
I believe it was earlier that year, so it was Winter Brawl. I want to say it was Winter Brawl 4. I don't know. I don't remember if that's the right one, but it was Winter Brawl 2010. He shows up out of nowhere. He tells us that he knows Dead, and he used to play Dead. But if anyone doesn't know, Dead is the like top international UMK3 combo artist, and I mean I don't think he's ever played in any like real like tournaments because it's just not a thing over there. But honorary, one of the greatest, of all time.
Absolutely.
This guy, just his unbelievable, I guess for lack of a better word, dedication to the UMK3 brand. I mean, I had a hand in teaching this guy English. I talked to him every single night on AIM. And would give him like English lessons while we were doing it. Like he would literally ask me for help with that. Like this was years that I talked to him. We made combo videos. He jumped in probably around like 06. We went from like 06 to 2010 making combo videos. Just I'd come home from I'd work like 3 to 11. I'd come home. I'd grab like late dinner, and then I would like record videos for hours, and then like after like a month of making combos, I would put together a video like in 8 hours. I would just put everything together. I would like send it to him, and he would review it. And it was just this collaboration. Anyway, yeah, we're like spinning off into like all these like satellite sort of people
I mean,
involved.
there's a
So,
lot. There's a lot of. It's tough
oh my,
because it all just kind of spins.
no,
Yeah, dead. All those guys.
no idea. They think that there was like nothing, like there was nothing, like the universe before the Big Bang. There was nothing before MK9, and that's it. Nope, I'm sorry, but there was a whole parallel universe before that. I could go on and on and on,
Well, we
but
couldn't unite. Like if it was me in the
yes,
Americas, like all of us, our crews out
yeah,
there, and then there was Dead over there, and
yep,
Hanzo and RZP,
yep.
whatever over there. I
There's
mean,
got other ones. There
we
was
had no way to unite. It just wasn't
yeah.
possible, like in the mid '90s.
Who's that Germany guy? Was it Chain? Is that the guy? He was another combo guy. He had
Yeah,
fantastic like
I
MK2
believe so. Yeah. Hmm.
combos, and Cellpex, and like again, there's just player after player after player. Very
When
very
did
sorry.
you meet Nitten? I call him M. Nit Shyamalan.
M Night Shyamalan.
When did you meet Nit? Nit was part of that
No,
old school MK2 crew with Jimmy, etc. These
yeah,
guys are the originators of competitive MK in the Northeast in general. Jimmy James MK was probably the first ever high level Mortal Kombat player ever.
yeah.
These guys were like, if you can believe it, a generation that even preceded me, and I'm old. Um,
They're like, okay, so what are you? You're like,
43. I started playing in 92, but I was, 14,
okay,
15,
yeah.
what I mean? Like,
All right, so I'm 39. So you're right in between me and Nit. Nit's gonna be 47. Jimmy's 50.
but these guys were
Yeah,
extremely good players as well.
yeah.
When did you meet Nitten? I mean, how did that happen?
Okay, so let's see. It was 2007. It was I want to say February at the break. It was an event. I think it was either Breakdown or Clash. I don't remember. They had these little like mini tournaments they would do before like an ECC. Um, and I was running a UMK3 tournament. And let's see. He must have just gotten the Xbox Live UMK3 release, which was like October of 06. So he was playing that, and he got sick of playing on the terrible Xbox 360 gamepad. He's a stick player. He doesn't know anything else. So it sucks. It's a severe handicap. Even if you're not like one of the best, you're gonna lose to people who are terrible if you're playing on something that you're not used to. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So he asked somebody. He like private messaged somebody after a match. He's like, "Hey, do you know if there's any arcade sticks for Xbox and that because specifically for UMK3?" And whoever it was knew about UltimateMK.com, which was fortunate for him. We also had a coupon deal for the guy who was making the sticks at the time, Dreaded Fist, and he sent him to Ultimate MK. He went there, he ordered a stick from Dreaded Fist, and he must have been glancing through the forums and saw, oh, cool, there's a tournament going on in New Jersey. He lived in Marlboro for a local reference.
God, what are the odds that
Yeah, yep,
Northeast and the scene
yep.
happens to be in the Northeast? What are the
Yep.
odds of that?
Just here. It's just here. I mean, I'm sure if I was someplace else and I was hundreds of miles away, it wouldn't have worked, but it just happened to be. He's 20 miles away from the venue. He's like, I'm going to go check this out. And he's thinking, I'm going to whoop everybody because he was good. He was good. And he's walking in being, 7 years older. He has um, not just the fighting game competitive edge, it was also all those high score games. All that stuff like builds that kind of competitive nature. So he's going into this thinking like, oh, there's nobody here who's going to be any good. I'm going to beat everybody. So I walk in and I see him playing one of the guys from Long Island that I know. There was this guy. There was like Vinny. I can't remember what the hell his last name was. He went by like Virus or something like that. It was like V1RU5. I think that was that was his name. But then you also had Frankie Bones and well, you know them, Ed Fig and Nataz. They were also coming out to tournaments. A few other guys here and there. Busta Uppa, you remember Busta
I
Uppa,
remember
right?
Bustapa, yeah.
of indie wrestling fame in the Long Island area.
That was back when you were EWA Shock.
I was
I know my history, man.
Yep. Everybody called me Iwashock. They didn't know that EWA was a wrestling company that I worked for at the time. But so anyway, I walk in and I see Nit playing there. And Nit is Indian, so I see myself. I don't usually see Indian, players. It's just not common thing. And especially because I'm watching, he's like whooping people with Ermac. I'm like, okay. I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing. So I get up there, I play him, look at him, shake my head, and I think we have like one of our first matches against each other. I know I have early matches, but it may be our first matches against each other ever recorded. And it was like Ermac and Kung Lao, I want to say, was our first one. I couldn't believe it. It's so rare. Again, this is 2007. It's so rare to even like run a tournament and like come across a person who knows what they're doing in a classic MK game. It's just rare. You know what I'm talking about. But like, you go to tournaments now, everything is a super concentrated atmosphere. Everyone, even if they're not good, they have all the frame data. They can read everything. They can talk a good game or whatever. They can maybe perform some of the target combos in some games. But even back then, it was still just such a refreshing thing to like be like, wow, somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Like, my God. And that's how I met Nit. The very first thing. And he had these two guys with him. This guy, Steve, who's a great MK2 player, and his brother-in-law. Steve is 6'3", and his brother-in-law is 6'6", so he's got like these two bodyguards with him, basically.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Quite a spectacle, So,
so moving on to 2010, when first time Team Spooky held it, it was called Evo East was the name of the tournament.
Evo, no,
Road to Evo, but it was Evo East.
Yeah,
there was
that was still okay because we did another
DOA 4, etc. I remember.
Yeah. We did another
tournament in
2007.
DOA.
Yeah.
So and Crazy Dominican won that tournament, did he not? And this was where you guys met up with Crazy Dominican, and at this point,
I had met him in 06 at NEC. He came to NEC 7. We have all of our. We did like a casual set on that, and I think most of that tournament was recorded. He, of course, in typical Crazy Dominican fashion, he showed up at like 9 p.m. and we're already basically through like most of the tournament, and he was like calling me up, or whoever was calling me, because he was kind of shy actually. But he had somebody calling me saying like, "Oh, he's gonna be there. He's gonna be there. Just hold off, just hold off." And I'm here. I'm like trying to hold off, running as much of the tournament as I can, with like 15 players, and I'm waiting for him. And he finally shows up, and I gotta like figure out how to get him into the bracket. It probably wasn't a legitimate way to do it, but
mistakes were made.
Yeah. So so he went in there and he wins that tournament handily, And there was another guy there, went by the name of Mach 1, and I use Mach 1 as an example. He was a good Nightwolf player, and I played him on Xbox Live, and he beat me 10-0 on Xbox Live, like the weekend before that tournament. He drove up from Florida. I think he stayed at an Xbox Live player's house the night before in like North Carolina. So he made the trip from North Carolina to Philly.
Mm-hmm.
He walks right in and he's like, "Let's do it. Let's play right now, first to 10." And what do you know? I beat him 9-0, and he wouldn't let me get the 10th win. He was like, "I gotta go to sleep." He's like, "I'll be back later." But here I was. I'm like, "I told you." I was like, "Online. It's online." I didn't want to get into that before, but
and online actually, ironically, did change the game. The bad connection ended up changing the game forever, which we'll get into in a second.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we're still. So then we're at.
Spooky. Now we're at finally. It's hard, guys, because you don't understand the things that were discovered earlier didn't come into effect till later. So the timeline is kind of like an Ed Boon timeline where we got to do it, then burn it down and reset it, and you know how it is. You modern MK players, we call Chronica, and we got to reset it and everything.
So there's just so much in terms of like small, like encapsulated events that happen that like nobody knows about because, again, like I said, very self-important up until this 2010 boom
Yeah.
game where it's starting to get real recognition as a game that's like making a comeback along the lines of like a Super Turbo or a Third Strike. It is now the MK game, and again,
It is.
now we're at 2010, right? Now
And
you
just so
have
you know, guys listening, real quick, I don't know, but
yeah,
so when Shaka's got UMK3.UMK.com, Ultimate Mortal Kombat.com, there's Mortal Kombat United. Unlike, I would say, any other game ever, the Mortal Kombat community was split in two. You had your 2D arcade classic Mortal Kombat guys over at Ultimate Mortal Kombat, and you had your 3D players over at Mortal Kombat United. So, and at this point, I believe you were doing this through MK Deception, MK Armageddon, and now at 2010, MK versus DC is out, MK United is the site. And there
this
have
is
been
not
multiple 3D sites
yeah.
since then, MKC, MKAC, etc.
Hmm.
But you, at no point did the 3D or the 2D community ever kind of really mesh. It was kind of like you guys are over
And I don't
there, and
never understood why, because you were heavily involved with both of the FGC and the online FGC,
yeah,
uh, in terms of like your connections, and I know that especially with Big E, we advertised that we were going to run the new games as they came out, and just there was never any interest. I know that every time I've ever had an interview about this, I talk about it. I
well, I'll tell
can't
you what the problem was. I can tell you what the problem was now.
nobody there.
The problem was MK Deadly Alliance was adopted by the 3D community. So tournaments that ran Tekken 4, Soul Calibur, at this point in time, early 2000s, tournaments were very segregated. Capcom had their 2D tournaments, and the 3D community had their own 3D tournaments. So you would see Marvel, Street Fighter, etc. 3D ones would have Tekken 4, MK Deadly Alliance, Soul Calibur
Mhm.
2.
Yep.
But it was still a tournament game. Once MK Deadly Alliance came out, the problem was, and even Armageddon, the way they made the netcode smooth was by changing the properties of the game from online to offline. You would
Yep.
have a move offline that's minus 30, and
Yes.
online it's plus 1.
Hard coded.
It was almost
Not
like the game was built to be played online. So its offline form, there were combos that only worked online, tactics that only worked online. The game literally became an online only
and
game.
not due to the internet. It was inherent to the
Coded.
program.
It was
So the
coded
code,
that way in
yeah,
the netcode
very
to
strange.
make it smoother by removing
Yeah.
recovery frames and frames of animation when you go from on to offline, which is, I think, the first time I've seen that, which is why versus DC was the, out of all the Deception, Armageddon, MK versus DC, was the closest, most resembled from online to offline. It was very similar.
Yeah, the least very.
Yeah, you didn't see that much kind of variant, but that's really why. So you're at I think it was Evo East. There's DOA 4, Tekken, Street Fighter, etc. And you have, of all things, UMK3 on the main stage being streamed by Team Spooky. It was well received. Everybody loved it. I watched it. A lot of people watched it. How did that happen? How did you link up with Spooky? How did you get it on the main stage of something like this?
So who was running that? Was that Andy? I can never remember. Was he running that? It was like
I'm
a
not
little
sure. I'm
cardio
not
as
sure.
well. Uh,
I'm not sure.
so we were invited to run it. It was me. It was 995 Phil, Dark Rob. We were running, all the MK stuff at the time for all the East Coast tournaments. So we were invited to do a UMK3 tournament. Just get it done. And I think we were told during the event that we would be streamed. Like it wasn't even like we weren't told we were being streamed going into it. Because I remember we had to like switch rooms and stuff because we were off on the side, of course. But they were adamant about us being there. And Vic was very very excited that he was going to get it because he saw the ECT success with the stream, and we set up in the main room, and in the main room is, I mean, people who are still around today. This is 10 years ago. there's people still around today who are like running the show. The room is just filled with a who's who of everyone from the scene, and even at the time, like people, and you know, it's you don't really think about it, you know, from that perspective. Is like
I think I lost him there. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get him back here.
hello,
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead.
gotcha. Where'd you lose me?
You were saying, take it from the top. So you were there. You were just told you were going to be on the main stage. You didn't know.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't think we knew going in that we were going to be streamed. I could be wrong on that, but I do remember it being mentioned while we were running the event to hold off like the top three. And again, it was me, Li Joe, and AC 1984, which was the same top three from ECT. And you know, Spooky was very excited, you know, that he was going to, you know, stream this because I assume he saw the ECT success. Or I guess you could call it that. Again, it's a rub. It's not you know wholly success for this old game that nobody knows anything about. But you have this who's who of everybody from the community at the time, everybody who's you know still around today and the glue that holds everything together. uh just watching you know people play this old game that they love and getting to see like it's just a different style of game, getting to see like people who know what they're doing in one game show that they know what they're doing in a completely different game is like to the people who are really interested in it. It brings it shines more light on the game. It's like wow, like and I never really thought that a game like that could have like serious serious play. And I've been told by numerous people that the set with me and Joe from that tournament is what made them want to become a competitive MK player, whether it was UMK3 or whether they moved on because MK9 was like announced like right around that time. As a matter of fact, um, they were they were getting ready to start releasing videos, I believe. But yeah, again, it was you started with X number of thousand viewers, and then you put on a game that nobody knows, and there's some people crying about it maybe in the chat, and then you win over the chat within 2 matches because it's so fast and so just like in your face. And Joe and I have a certain style of play. We don't necessarily abuse like all the the the
We're
game
getting into
winning.
that in a second. We're getting there.
So it was just fun to have back to back UMK3 featured streams. It wasn't just like some guy showed up, with his rinky dink equipment, and it was like, oh, I'll record the stuff, I'll put it on my YouTube channel. No, it was like the event was like, let's put this on because it's gonna be fun.
Okay, so this tournament happens, and you mentioned that 995 Phil and Dark Rob, who were again huge in the MK9 days, as well with helping to put tournaments together. God knows how many times myself and Rio had gone over to Rob's
Yeah.
to play. You couldn't count it; it was just too many times.
Mhm.
So, uh, so at this time, I'm playing Rio like every night in MKDC, and somehow Rio begins to get into the classic MKs.
Mhm.
How did you find out about him? How did Rio even? I mean, like, how did he come to become like the first tournament he ever went to offline was a UMK3 tournament at Summer Jam 2010.
Ye-
Uh,
was it the first one?
yep.
Okay.
I remember because after the Tekken top eight, I was like, I got to meet this guy, man. I play this guy every day online. We beat the crap out of each other every day. I got to shake this guy's hand, man. I got to meet him. When I found out he was coming, I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to wait until the UMK tournament so I can finally meet Rio. This
Uh,
is his first tournament. How was this a Dark Rob connection? How did I mean like how did this
yeah.
online guy from the 3D era
Yeah.
then become a tournament player in also the 2D games? How did this happen?
So okay, I had no contact with the 3D guys, not at all. Like I knew who some of them were, but none of them talked to me. I was always under the impression that they did not like me. They didn't want anything to do with me. Hence the reason why there was never any interest in running any of their games at the events, which we would have gladly done. Put that out there. There was there were these guys on Long Island. They just played at somebody's house, and Phil invited me to come over because they were like, there's this guy Rio. He's unbelievable MK player. He wants to learn the old games." So I went over, and I must have played Rio for like 2 hours. UMK3. He only played Liu Kang at the time, and I was like, wow. I was like, he's just really good. Like you know the difference between like somebody who plays one game and somebody who just is good at fighting games. And I got that vibe from him. Again, he was like 18, I think, at the time. I was like, he knows what he. So so that was the first time I met him, and I think that's what really sparked like his full emergence into the classics. Was playing that night. I don't remember who those people were at all. Like, because literally it was just me and Rio just playing. That was it. It was. You lose me there.
Yeah, go ahead. I got you though. So you and Rio playing. You played all night. This
Yeah.
was where Dark Rob's. Where did you guys meet up?
Yeah, Dark Rob and Phil, and I don't remember whose house it was. It wasn't theirs. It was these other guys who were like maybe third strike players. Um, I don't remember who they were, but it was just some random house on Long Island, and Rio happened to be there, or they knew Rio was going to be there, and he really wanted to like play somebody who knew what they were doing in UMK3, from what I remember, because he wanted to learn. Yeah, he really, he just knew, just playing that Liu Kang all night. It was ridiculous.
Okay, now we're about to transition to a very odd time in the life of UMK3, but before we get to that, this is the game changer. Glitch jabs. It is
Hmm.
my understanding, God, as fate would have it, the only thing Xbox Live did right for UMK3 was it was so hard to hit a combo, people just started using low punch, low punch, low punch, low punch, low punch, right? Just glitch
I,
jabbing.
sorry, I've never heard it explained like that. I really what I think it is. And so we had
Well, first explain what glitch jabs are, and then let's talk about how
so,
they got
so
invented.
there's a few different phrases that people use, and they all
Okay.
mean different things.
Okay.
So you have run jabs, right? So people think that
This
run
is the
jab,
90s. Run jabs.
yeah, people think that run jabs mean like running and jabbing, and it like sort of means that, but really what it means is that you're canceling the jab with the run button. So, um, to explain some of the mechanics of how jabs work in the 2D game. So we'll just say one, two, and three. Jabs can be canceled by anything. Literally anything in the game can cancel jabs. But if you
Including
can't,
block and run.
yep, block, run, high kick, low kick can cancel jabs. So a jab, I don't remember how many frames it is, but just say it's 12 frames is a full punch and recoil for the
Which
for
is, it's like 10 times faster than that, man.
okay. So you hit run at any time as the jab is going out, and it takes 6 frames off or something like that. Whatever it is, it cuts it in half. So you can see when people utilize this with run jabs, because the jabs recover faster, so you can run sooner and you can keep pressuring your opponent while doing damage, because block damage is in all the 2D games. Um, so that's one phrase that people use. So then you have Kara jabs, which means that you're like doing the jab, but not for the purpose of the jab. Maybe you're trying to like bait someone, but you're canceling it with block instead of run. Now here's the thing: when you cancel with block, if you hold the block button, they will block. But if you just tap it, it's the same thing as run. But what it does is it's training you to block instead of like stopping, to prevent a counter, so like a sweep or something like that. So you'll like block low as you're jabbing. This is all very meta. um, but then there's uh, glitch jabs, which it earned the name glitch jabs because you can jab repeatedly. So everybody knows that if you just like mash like low punch or high punch, they'll just they're punching in place. But if you press and hold block as you start the jab flurry, they will continue to jab, but they will also have block properties. So that means that they're attacking and they're also defending. And then if you hold down, they'll block sweeps, but they won't duck. They'll still jab. And if you hold back, you can prevent throws. So back prevents throws, down block prevents the sweeps, and you're just jabbing. So it creates this like unnatural sort of offense, I guess you could say, because like you're just literally you're defending, like
While you're
you're
attacking,
invincible in a
you're
sense
doing damage while
to connected hits.
yeah, you're doing
And people
damage.
got very frustrated with this very quickly because you don't know if they're blocking or not. They're
Yeah.
just jabbing, and it's almost like combining like taunting too, in a sense, as a strategy. Now we had documented this as a tech, like in '07. I think there's like one post from Dreamer NJ on ultimatemk.com about it. He was testing something and he was doing like frame advanced testing, and he was like, "Oh, by the way, you can do this," and he like explained it, but it was never talked about after that. Literally nothing. And then around 2010, it started to become a
What brought it to
tactic
the
that
forefront? Like where
was
where
pervasive throughout online
who did?
tournaments. Now you said it's because it was so hard to actually play the game that it just devolved into this jab fest where it was like jab 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 until somebody makes a
Which
mistake.
ironically wasn't far off from how it was in the '90s, just we weren't blocking what we were doing.
Exactly, exactly. If you watch the old footage of like
We
Lex
didn't
playing,
we didn't do we just did jabs. We didn't all we did was jabs.
yep, it'll be like 2 or 3 jabs and then a block check, and then like maybe like a sweep or a jump kick, and then you'll get somebody in the corner and just jab their life bar out. So those are like the 3 main ones, and then you have the corner jab frame traps, which are, I mean, okay,
They're block infinites, and
the block infinite, and it's silly. But anyway, yeah. So that, I mean, that was like, I know there's been other stuff since then. Like people started getting into like the punishing like things on block that are like to the frame nearly. You know how like in MK1 you gotta like punish sweeps with like the spear like every
yeah, of
time.
course, yeah.
Yeah, you can do that in 2 and 3. It's just that they're much faster games, so there's far less. There's more opportunities to do it, but far less timing. So it's like you have to be buffering. Like you
A
can
great
on.
example would be Liu Kang's bicycle kick. Unless you're a sweeper, which would be characters Sonya, Jax, Kano, where your sweep recovers quickly, you could block a sweep from most characters, release low kick, and you get what's considered a counter hit bicycle kick, which is coincidentally why you can no longer run after the bike kick, because you used to be able to get the run into the full combo. But it was just one of the example of ways that you could still punish it. You know, just charge low kick, you block a sweep, like say you block a ball sweep, free bike kick, etc. I lost you there again.
Oh, good. Yeah,
No,
that's
what I was
weird.
saying was Liu Kang's bike kick is a great
Mhm.
example of that. Where unless you're fighting against a fast recovery sweep character like Sonya or Jax, Kano, or someone like that,
Yeah.
you could block the sweep, release low kick, bike kick comes out as a counter hit.
Yep.
In
And then
fact, the main reason why he can no longer run is regular MK3.
yeah.
It would count as a counter, and then you got the run into the full combo.
Yes.
Which is why you can no longer run after it. So there were instances like that still in the game, but like you said, outside of something like that, it's pretty difficult to kind of like punish it. You know, most people didn't.
Yeah. 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 But
So
now that's become a thing. So like, there's a handful of very, very good players left, and they do this stuff, and it's fantastic. I just, I
but
don't see
who
that.
made the glitch? Who made? Look, it's all under the umbrella. If you talk to somebody right now, they'll put everything under glitch jabs. You know, like everything you just mentioned, they just file it under. Oh yeah, glitch jabs. Which Nitin hates, by the way. It's
Of course,
like he plays MK2 over
getting
MK.
stuck in the corner.
Who brought that from kind of like the back rooms of the MK world and made a big deal out of? Hey guys, this is the dominant tactic. When did that become like to the forefront of the game?
That would be Mr. I Got Base. He was the one who really, he was the one who really used it, and you heard people complain about it.
And I
That was
believe he won
that
that
was,
tournament, did he not? That summer jam,
he
he
won.
beat
He won
Rio,
summer.
right? Rio got second, IGB won, correct?
I think Rio sandbagged on purpose, but yes, he
I
did.
mean, I don't know. Rio's been kind of ruthless, man. I've never known him to sandbag.
You
wish you
never
would.
know. He could have been pissed at me for something.
I wish you would have sandbagged against me some of our sessions, to be honest with you. But it made it a bit easier on me. So IGB wins. Glitch jabs are like everywhere now. Coincidentally, while this is finally starting to be talked about on the forums, there's also other rumblings, and people needed answers. Now a lot there was not. So you talked about Li Joe this tournament, Crazy Dominican this tournament, Mo over here, Lex. In Florida, you had Marva Rasta, who was huge. Online on Kylara, everybody knew who Marva Rasta was.
Yeah, he eventually made it to his tournament.
People needed an answer. They're like, all right, we got Rio. Jugs was playing a lot online. DC Hustle. You.
Get Arion coming up.
Arion. Was he the Jax player? Is that who it was? No doubt, right?
No doubt with Katana.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Crazy Dominican, Marv Rasta. You like? Oh, they're like, all right, man. These
All-
guys all can't be the best, right? I mean, like, come on, man. Who is? Right? The internet needed an answer, and most people don't know this part of history, but this is actually where the scene that you have today playing Mortal Kombat came from.
Mm-hmm.
NEC 2010. I remember we were over at Nitton's place, myself, Rio, you were there, Rob, we were all hanging out having a good time.
Yep.
And I remember you were like, hey, this is the first time, and we've had many times, we've been over there since then. But you said, you know what? Why don't we do the unthinkable? Let's do an MKDC tournament, right? And
Yep.
you had MKDC, and for UMK3, you were like, let's invite them all, man. Let's try to get Marva Rasta there, Crazy Dominican, Rio, Jugs, DC, anybody that you could get. Now, Mo wasn't able to make it, Lex, etc. But
Yeah.
you got a lot of the heavy hitters, a lot of the overall consensus of this guy may be the best. A lot of those guys were there. This is the first time all that talent of the modern era was finally competing simultaneously.
Yes.
As opposed to this guy here, that guy there.
Yeah, because we had seen Beatings, which was another spooky stream, and it was like
Mo.
Yeah, it was
Let's
a
go back, actually. My mistake. I want to touch on that. That was on a cabinet, correct?
Yes.
So Seasons Beatings 2010 was the very first time that one of the legacy Chicago players, Mo, one of the best players in the world, rightfully so, accepted so, he shows up. This is in Ohio, so not too far from Chicago.
He got a speeding ticket on the way.
Of course, Mo. I'm surprised the cop gave him. Mo's the nicest guy in the world. I'm surprised the cop didn't let him off. So Mo, he shows up. Was Thrower there with him?
Yeah, I can give you the background on the whole top 8.
Okay, so before we get to that, so you had the cabinet, right? The cabinet was on two cabinets, if I remember correctly.
I think one was Tim Statics, and one belonged to the venue or the guy Lucky Day. I had requested that they modify the cabinet so that we could use the PlayStation controllers as well, and I gave them a suggestion on how to do it, because at the time, like, super guns were a thing, but like, if you didn't know, you couldn't really waste too much time. So he, being like a tech guy, did his own way and managed to get it to work. It wasn't perfect, but he did manage.
First time I've ever seen that, by the way.
Yes.
I've never seen that on an old school Gemma like that.
Yeah. They didn't want to, but I was like, if you want to have, and again, they were pushing. They invited us from New Jersey to run an Ohio tournament because they were starting to build their scene up. They had requested that we run it, and I was like, if you want to have the maximum turnout, you have to run. They were like, we're not running on console. I was like, I absolutely understand that. I was like, if you're not going to run on console, you have to modify your cabinet. You can use like very simple DB9 connectors or something like that for modified for like PS2 controllers. That's super easy for a person who knows anything about wiring. But they did it their own way. They used like RG45 connectors, and they spliced it onto the leads for the arcade controls, and they made it work. And for the first time, we had like 36 players.
And you broke the barrier, whereas no longer, hey, play on this custom stick and you play on the pad.
Yep.
It was now
Exactly.
on the
And
cabinet.
yep.
On the cabinet, you play on the stick or the pad. This was
Uh,
a big deal because this was the very first big meeting of like one
yeah.
of the legendary legacy players of the time, Mo.
Yeah.
Did you talk to
Also,
any of the other Chicago guys that had played? You talked to
yeah,
Hernandez. You didn't talk to Hernandez much, right?
no, I've never spoken to him. But yeah, so
So
Mo and Thrower. So this is yeah. So this is how it breaks down.
Lex was. I think Lex had moved to the West Coast at this time,
Yeah,
right? So he wasn't. Yeah, he moved on. He started competing in
yeah,
martial arts.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think he might have been in Canada at the time.
I know eventually he moved to the West Coast shortly after, and he became a martial arts instructor.
Yeah.
And I believe he actually started competing as well. But
Yes.
he
Yeah.
was out of that area at that time, right? So he
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay.
That wasn't gonna happen. So yeah. So okay. So we're at season beatings. I told them to do the mod on the cabinet, and it was like really last minute because I was on my way. I'm like, "Did you guys mod the cabinet yet?" And the answer was no. I was like, "Oh man!" I was like, "We got a lot of people coming out expecting to do that because it wasn't like we only just talked about it like behind closed
You
doors."
drove quite a few people as well, right? How many people
Oh
did
yeah,
you actually drive there?
there were 6 of us in the van and 5 of us played. So it was me, 995 Phil, Rio, Summoning, and AC 1984, and Nit's brother-in-law. So there were 5 of us that played, and its brother-in-law. So yeah, we all drove out there in my van. That's still the same van I still use today. It was my grandparents actually. The so the tournament broke down to Ohio's got all these guys that are really like up and coming. You had the Rouse twins. You had McLovins, Q. It's like a few people out there who were really pushing for their own scene, like we had in the Northeast already for almost 10 years at that point. Again, this is 10 years ago, and we were working on this for close to 10 years at the time. So, so they asked us to come out to run this event. We're like, absolutely. Tim Static's there. He's got the megaphone. He's pushing everything. And we're doing signups and we hit like 32 players and we're like, this is like amazing. This is, I think even like a couple like Flo, I think entered, but I think he had to leave. And I know there was somebody else from Chicago there. It was Johnny Cakes, I want to say, was there, and he had to leave too, which was unfortunate. But we had in total like 36. So we're very happy with that. And in the top 8, so the top 8 was Rio 1, then it was Mo, Thrower, Conqueror was 4th, and then 5th was, I think it was me, and it was maybe AC 1984, and then it was like Summoning and Out to God. Every single person in the top 8 out of the 36 players was there because of this guy.
Now, let me talk about these guys that were there because you mentioned quite a few names. Let's start from the bottom. Aldegod. Aldegod was a legacy player back from the era of Nit,
Yep.
James MK, correct?
Yes.
Legacy Northeast player.
Just an all
Comber
fighting game player.
was from Utah, and he was a guy who had played many of the classic games in the arcade, was a very good player, and also was very good, extremely skilled at the 3D games.
Yes. Another combo artist.
But he was also very good as well.
Yeah.
Combo artist, very good.
Yep.
AC 1984, Northeast.
He's
Yeah, you were there. Rio was there. I remember Mo, Thrower, etc. So you had a lot of people from that Midwest area and from the Northeast. Now, how did you get this streamed? This was streamed on Team Spooky, correct? This was a big deal. This was, I think, the pinnacle of the game at this point, because it was, people were like, okay, there's a legacy, because people that were on the forums at the time, they all knew Mo. Everyone spoke very highly of him as a legendary legacy player, and here we have Mo going up against Rio in grand finals, streamed on Team Spooky on the main stage. So this was top 8 day, and Spooky streaming this on a main day. How did this get streamed? How did you get the cabinet to get streamed? I mean, I'm curious. I think I lost him again. Okay, can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay, so what I was saying was, so
Yeah.
here it is.
Mo against Rio.
Yeah, Mo against Rio, top 8 day. Spooky is streaming this. How did you get the arcade cabinet streamed? at this point?
So at this point, it was still very, very difficult to stream directly from a board for any MK game. Anything running on I forget what TSM, whatever the hell the designation is. This board was just notoriously annoying with the
This is
vertical.
2010, right? So
This is 20.
technology isn't. This is
It
10
could be
years
done.
ago of
Yeah,
technology. Okay.
it could be done. I think one guy who had done it successfully at this point. Um, so I get there, they're getting ready to start, and Vic is like, "Oh, just give me a few more minutes." He's like, "I think we got this," and I don't know what kind of converters or signal adapters or whatever he had at the time. But all he was getting was audio, and he was getting a vertical scroll of the video just like flying past, and there was nothing he could do. And I told him, I was just like, "Look, I'm like, I don't know everything about this stuff, but from what I can tell you is that there's a very specific refresh rate, and you need a very specific card to match it, and it's just not worth the trouble." So he was pissed, of course, because he wants the best quality for his stream. So I said to him, I was like, "We have a handheld camera." I was like, "We can just run the video off the camera, and we'll just do that. And I think if we line it up right, that'll be fine. And run the audio off the board because that's simple. That's just how it is." And that actually wound up working pretty well. I think we had to like reset the camera at one point, but otherwise, there wasn't going to be a stream if we didn't do it like that. Par for the course with this stuff. It's just people who don't do this don't know that there's just these nuances
I
with.
mean, it was limited. Technology is.
Yeah,
It was not what it is now. You know.
yes, even now it's annoying, but
So Rio won, and this
yeah.
tournament was huge. How many thousands were watching this? Because it was big.
I always assume it's around 3 to 5,000 for any one of the big three.
Which it was a lot back then.
That was
You
a
gotta
lot.
understand, 10 years ago that was a lot for
That's your whole.
something not Evo.
That's the whole community watching. Like that's the whole like interested community at the time. Um, so yeah, it definitely was in the thousands from when I can remember. If anybody was watching at the time, and there are people who watch it and remember, like, "Oh yeah, I was watching. This is 2744 or something like that." Yeah,
And keep
um,
in mind, this is 15 years after
yeah,
the game Arcade Prime,
yep, 15 years.
and you have
So now we're at 35.
3,000 plus watching.
Yep. So yeah, so I was doing a little bit of commentary, along with Tim Static. And I just remember commentating the Rio and a Mo match, and now Mo is up on Rio. Rio came out of losers. I think he lost to Mo the night before.
He
So Rio
did. He had to win two
started.
sets.
Yes. So Rio, I mean, he like squeaked by the first set of grand finals. I thought Mo had him. I really did. And not necessarily that Mo was better than him at that time, but there's something to be said about like that experience factor. Like I don't know if Rio gets nervous, but um, you got something to prove.
Yeah, he
You're
doesn't. I can tell you, he doesn't.
yeah.
It's at that point. Yeah, no.
So he learned the matchup. I guess I don't know if he even thought about it from the night before, but he learned. And he made Mo switch his character, and that was the beginning of the end. And then I think he did win a match. He went with Robot Smoke after Human Smoke. I think he did win a match with Robot Smoke after that, but Rio just turned it around like a ball.
And that was a big deal at
Yep.
the time. And that really UMK at that point exploded. At that point, the lid was completely blown off.
hmm
Um,
And now all these guys that were message board guys, Xbox Live guys, they're like, okay, let's come out. Let's do this.
and from there, this was, I believe, in March of 2010. Uh, or it might have been
2011.
October.
What was it?
It might have been October. No, it was October of 2010.
Seasons Meetings was October, like roughly October 2010.
2010, October 2010. So then all of a sudden, everyone's coming out, and then you
Got any?
guys dared to cross the holy line that no 2D MK player dared to cross. Let's do a big tournament. Let's invite them all, right? From all the online warriors that people had talked about,
Yeah.
the guys we know
Personally,
about.
yeah.
And let's screw it. Let's hold a 3D game there too, right? Let's
Yep.
dare to cross that line. And they were not happy about the 3D game being held there.
Yeah, it had never happened before because nobody wanted to do it.
Yeah, Deadly Lions had not been, had almost been a decade. I'd say 8 years
Yeah.
since the 3D MK had seen a tournament, and then all of a sudden here you are hosting.
Am I right to say that there was like nothing for Deception or Armageddon?
None Deception, none Armageddon, no, and at this point none for DC.
Yeah, there had to be places that ran them.
I had never heard of them.
Okay,
Maybe in
Texas, maybe.
no, maybe there was a guy Master Malone on the forums who talked about I think in Granada Hills there was an
Okay,
arcade there that
California.
yeah they used to have an arcade machine with it, but I don't know if there was a competitive scene there or not.
Yeah,
But you
but
hold
I
this
really
tournament. Here, this is the biggest thing that I can remember of the game. This is the day the modern scene that all of you have today was actually born. So
yes.
you invite them all. You say Crazy Dominican, let's invite him. Marvel Rasta, let's get him out here from Florida and talk about who Marvel Rasta was. So a lot of people don't even know who he is.
So up until that point, like I'd only heard about him as just being this fantastic player. I knew nothing else about him other than people were afraid. They were afraid of him because he had the trademark aggressive style.
What did I call him, Shock? What did I call him?
Flawless execution.
The
No, I don't.
greatest jabber of all time.
Yeah, well,
I didn't know he was glitch jabbing though. We'll get to that in a second.
he,
He told me.
you know what? Against me, he didn't do that. He just played a really, really solid, just perfect execution, minimal mistakes. We went back and forth in casuals. We had a really, really good time. Played a small set. I didn't use like any like particular characters. We just went at it, and I mean, I watched everyone else fall. It was like Saving Private Ryan. He just was taking them down one after another. I was like, oh my
How
god.
did you get him there? Did you reach out to him like, hey, do you?
He, from what I remember, there was at least an acknowledgement from him that he would make an attempt to go.
Online,
So
he was at that time, safe to say, the most feared player on
yeah,
the online scene. Okay.
yep, I would definitely say so.
So you get he reaches out to you, or you reach out to him, however, and he
I don't
he was
remember.
coming.
Yeah, I don't remember which way that went, but I'm almost positive that I was expecting him to be there. It wasn't like
Then
he
you got Crazy Dominican also, and this was big because
last minute showed up late. Last.
of course I remember this too. We were holding it up for him.
Yep. And
This was
can he
big
get
because
right?
at this time people were like, no, Rio's the best. You know, he beat Mo. No. You had a bunch of people who had never lost really. Like they were winning a bunch of tournaments. Crazy Dominican came on. People were like, no. Crazy Dominican's the best. Marvel Rasta, they're like, no. This guy's beating everybody online. Nobody can beat this guy. People were like, no, Rio's the best. And people said maybe Jugs or DC Hustler. They're like, no, it's Shock or all these people. And it was like, you know what? The internet needs an answer. Let's get them all together in one tournament. How did you go about getting all of them there? Like this was the first time all of that talent was finally in the same place at the same time. Did you catch that?
Okay, so what was the last part again?
What I said was, so you had all these players there from because people were like, we need an answer. Like who's the real best, right? It's Crazy Dominican. People say he's the best. No, it's Rio. It's Shock. It's Marv. It's DC Hustle. It's Jugs. It's this guy. It's that guy. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So
how did you get them all there? Like how did you reach out to? Because at this time it was might get Mo. You might get Li Joe. And Li Joe didn't even play in this tournament, right?
Oh, he did.
He did.
He did.
Okay.
Yeah.
You might get Li Joe, but to get them all there, you might get Crazy Dominican. But to have you and Li Joe and
I did try to get Mo and Thrower out to this one. It was unfortunate. If we had them out there too, and I think if we could have gotten Conqueror out again, it would have been like the. I mean, it was for what it was itself, but I mean, really, the possibility of having all of these top players in there at once was there. It's just that we missed out on a few, but the NEC tournament was a very different landscape from the Seasons Beatings tournament. While I would say that the NEC tournament had better overall talent, the Seasons Beatings had like the passing of the torch moment. I think really that's what it was. It was finally like the acknowledgement of like the new players because we could both play on the definitive platform, the arcade, in the respective controller preferences. There was no argument there. That was it. That was definitive. But then you have other players show up who didn't get a chance to play yet. They are like, we want to, put our names in the hat. So you had these guys show up because they finally saw that it was worth it to come out, I think.
Okay, so Marv Rasta wins. CD gets second. I think Rio was third.
Hmm.
This was
Yep.
a big deal. This was kind of like a lot of even the 3D MK community for the first time ever was actually paying attention to this tournament. Normally,
Yeah.
you would run these tournaments over the last decade. 3D community didn't care. They didn't watch the results. They didn't care about watching the videos.
Hmm.
And now finally, and then it was an MKDC tournament, which ironically had myself and Rio in finals, and you also got matches like Rio versus Czech. Czech was
Hmm.
one of the 3D MK gods at that time for sure. Like pretty much
Everyone
invented.
remembered
If you go back to like the very start of the online MK era, MK Deception. If you go to his channel now, you'll see like the craziest stuff, match videos,
it. Yeah.
etc. So you have
He
a
had
lot
Recreate.
big names. Jago was there from the Carolinas as well. You had Storms played in it as well. You had people who were playing, and people were like, "Wow, to see Czech play, Rio play, etc.
Yep.
All these guys going up against each other, these great players, even in the 3D era." And it was like, not only did the 2D games like explode at times 10 of what they already were, then the 3D players were like, you know what? We're tired of this. We were all there. We saw what was going on with UMK3. We don't want this to be the end. We want this from now on.
Hmm.
And from there, Crazy ended up holding a tournament on the West Coast that I went out to, and then you held another one at Winter Brawl. And there was no putting the lid back on this. And there was some
Yeah.
pushback from the 3D community, was there not? That, we don't care about tournaments. The hell with this test the night site.
Yeah. There was this just perpetual, and I use this phrase nowadays to nowadays describe like how people are with politics is this contrarian attitude where like you have to do the opposite of what somebody you disagree with you says, no matter how right they are, and you see it with like just players who like they want to have the credit for everything, but they don't want to do any of the work, and you still see that to this day. Um, Unfortunately, the people who actually do this stuff are the ones that are known and the ones that people maybe trust, and then they still try to tear them down. Still, it's unfortunate, and I don't see anything but MK9 as being the answer to unite, and that's what happened. I think after that.
So many people who are watching may say, okay, that's nice and all, but UMK3 is kind of like on the down note now and everything's esports, whatever. But what you guys don't realize is this all came from the evolution and rebirth of UMK3. You see, even at Winter Brawl, before MK9 came out, first of all, before MK9 was launched, they contacted myself, and you were out there. Conqueror was out there, Crazy was out there, Czech was out there, etc. A lot of us were out there as testers. I think it was 5 of us, right?
So, okay, so I've always been a little foggy on this. It's funny, like we've never really talked about it.
Yeah, it's true.
The I was under the impression that you were out there, you were testing the game with their salaried testers, and I always thought that you were like, we got to get like people who are actually in the field out there to like like scrutinize the gameplay and make this a competitive game.
So at this time, what was happening is MKDC came out. Midway was pretty much selling everything. To my knowledge, there was the DC caused the merger with Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers said, "Look, if it's not the Mortal Kombat team, we're closing it and we're
Yeah,
liquidating it to sell as much debt as possible." And then the Mortal Kombat team was rebranded as NetherRealm Studios.
yeah, they were the only thing that was salvaged, I think.
And of course, here comes this new Mortal Kombat game, and It's got to do well. I mean, there's a lot of expectations on the WB end, right? So of course they bring out, they say we got to get guys on the ground floor. Obviously, guys that are out there competing. Who is it? Myself, you,
It was me, you, Conqueror,
Conqueror,
Check,
Check, and Crazy.
Crazy Bone, Mo, Thrower,
Mo and
and
Thrower, who are local, yeah.
Jason Wilson.
Yeah, and Wilson, who is also doing the guide.
He was doing
Yeah, and
I remember that. I don't remember if there was anybody else.
we were there for a week,
Not even.
5 days.
64 hours.
And I remember Winter Brawl, again the usual UMK3, etc. And there was a lot. This tournament had a lot of people there. For people who were playing casuals in the 3D games, the 2D machine didn't turn off ever. There was a match every 2 seconds, constantly.
We had a whole room for ourselves too.
A whole room. It was one of the first times this has happened. Mortal Kombat had its own room for just
Like,
Mortal Kombat games.
Yeah.
And this is pre MK9.
Yeah.
At this time was kind of a meeting of the minds. Gerchap from MKU was there. Storms, you, etc. 999, Phil, 995 Phil, Dark Rob, etc. They were crazy. They were all there from UMK, Ultimate Mortal Kombat.com.
Representation from every land.
Yeah.
And
it was kind of like, you know what? This is the new game. This is where the community is going. And it was kind of like a mutual agreement. We're going to go to the competitive scene. We're going to push it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a lot of new players came out there for the first time. Ryu 48, guys that would begin to start competing in the next layer, the NetherRealm era.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Mortal Kombat 9 came out, around the country, a lot of people, most of the tournaments were in the Northeast. Their majors, the big majors adopted the game. Obviously, Evo, CEO, but as far as like a lot of the majors or regionals were taking place in the Northeast.
Yeah.
A lot of people wondered why. Like, why does the Northeast, whatever? Well, people didn't realize
why was there such an emphasis?
That this guy Shock here, the 10 plus years of build, there was already a tournament scene there.
Yeah.
So
there was a foundation, a landing pad, basically. I ask you the question: do you think, without the Northeast scene, would any of those other MK9 hotbeds would they have popped up without VSM, without the example of the player base? I mean, I don't know if it would have happened or not.
Eventually, maybe. At that point in the game, at the point it was no, because what happened was very early in the game, you had tournaments in other areas that would have a certain number. But if the Northeast held a tournament, it was double, at least, the
usually.
entrance.
I do remember Seasons Beatings had like 90 players, which was very good for an MK game.
Summer Jam had a hurricane, and there was an MLG event, and we still broke over 80
players. I think it was 65, something like that. But we did well for our turnouts.
One of the NECs had, I think, the first NEC had like 130, I think it was, which was very, very good.
It was ECT.
Was it ECT?
3.
Which one was it?
ECT 3 was the first major for MK9, if I remember correctly. And that had it was like 149.
No, it was Power Up. I remember it was Power Up. Then there was CEO, and then because remember I lost 2 sets to Chris G, and then after that it was Power Up in the Midwest. Then there was UFGT. Then there was CEO. It was the PDP tournament in between there, but that was more of a corporate event. And then here comes ECT, and I think ECT. That was over 130 people. I think that was at that time, numbers wise, massive for the MK scene. Man, this connection tonight.
How does it? No, it does this with everybody.
I don't know why.
That I've ever gone on Discord with, it always cuts out. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's me.
Discord is fickle some days. Yeah. I think ECT that year was the first time MK had broken over that 130.
Yeah, it
ran until pools and everything and top 16 to like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that was because there was
power went out.
Power went out. Yeah. I remember people all lined up. I'm like behind the line, and I'm seeing all these people. They're like foaming at the mouth because they want to play this game. I remember, pretty sure 16-bit was there.
He was actually.
Yeah,
Or
and,
she was at this point.
yeah, um, yeah. I just remember people just being very, very angry, and yeah, the pools went until like 3 in the morning. I think John Gallagher, I believe, was like he was sleeping next to the setup, making
He
sure that
was.
the last sets were played. He didn't want to leave until they were done. James MK made his debut
That was
there.
it. That was his reemergence. Yep, James McKay came back.
Debut, where he caused quite a stir. I was
Yeah.
very, very angry with him towards the end of the night because I remember seeing the name and I thought it was this is another player who went by MK James, and I thought maybe it was him, and I didn't see him. Hello.
I got you. Yeah, and you didn't see. You thought it was MK James.
I thought it was MK James, but I was calling it James MK like every like 20 minutes for hours. And I don't like DQing people if I have other matches to run. Like if it
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
if it's
yeah.
format, I don't DQ people. So finally, I had to DQ him. Had to DQ him because it was just there was no other match to play, and you can see as it's going on that the crowd is like thinning out. There was like 100 people standing there, and it's like slowly but surely. And I see this woman, and I see this guy sitting in a chair, and I'm like, "Are you James MK?" He's like, "Yeah." So what about it? Like yeah, he is, and I'm like, uh. I've been. He's like, I didn't play my matches, and I was like, I called you like 20 times. I'm like, where were you this whole time? And we we got into it.
He was at the bar, man, with me.
It was at the bar with you. I
Me,
knew.
Nitin, we were off the bar. Yeah.
So and I told him only recently, actually, within like the last year or so. He was DQ'd, but to avoid conflict, I like went over to two guys that I know that were good, and I was like, "Can you do me a favor? Can you play this guy and beat him so I can get him out of here and we can close off for the night, basically."
I mean,
So
honestly,
like,
when he came, this was like for players like myself who knew him from the arcade era as the James MK, the guy who worked on the console versions, the guides, etc. I met him when I was 18 when he was working at East Brunswick Mall Arcade. To us, it was like this unicorn who had returned. Like we're like, what? 15 years later, James MK is back, right? Like to me, because I only met him when I was 18, right? Now here I am, like
yep.
all these years later, and I'm like, holy crap,
He was
James
so
MK. And I remember Simon telling whoever, he was like, yeah, there's some guy here says his name is James MK. He wants to kill you.
now he goes. His
Was that Frank?
Simon runs in and he's like, bro, there's this guy. He's here. He wants to kill Nitin. I'm like, wait, what? He's like, it's really bad, bro. And I was like, what? It's like
I was like,
a
who is he? And he's like, his name is James MK. I was like,
no,
oh my
no,
God.
I got a hold of summoning. He was like at lunch with his family across the street at like a restaurant. I got him over, and his buddy Steve, Big Steve, they come in, and I'm like, Simon, what happened? And he's like, bro, this guy, he said, do you know? He saw the UMK3 stick, and he was like, do you know? He's like, do you know summoning? I want to slit his throat. Like that was what Jimmy said, and Steve and Nit literally look at each other in stereo and go, Jim Fink.
Dude. And
It was
everyone's like, oh, there's going to be drama here. And I'm the only one like running to like, where is he? I got to see him again, man. I haven't seen him since I was 18.
Yeah.
Everyone's.
Frank Red Saline,
Oh,
he was standing there, right? And he and Nit had apparently said a whole bunch of stuff about Jimmy on a message board, and he was pissed. And he's going through his phone. He's scrolling through his phone. He's like, "Look, you said right here on December 16th, 2004, you said this." And he's like going through all. I'm like, "Oh my god! Like this is nuts." And Frank is standing there, and he does like the Homer Simpson in the bushes because he's like, "And where's Frank?" He's like, "If I see him, I'm gonna punch him in the face," you know. And Frank disappeared. He was gone.
And he was never seen again. Actually, that was it.
He messages me every now and then, but yeah, I think that was his.
That was it. Yeah, that was the end. That was the end.
It was so upset. It was a cartoon. Oh my god.
But there were a lot of tournaments in the Northeast that were huge, and eventually they caught on. You know, DGA, Florida had their own scene. Atlanta with Pig had
I loved it.
Battle
It was
Crew, Texas.
everything
But
I
the
wanted.
Northeast started it. The Northeast, the tournament scene of the Northeast was so big
Mhm.
Everyone tuned into because you had NEC, Winter Brawl, Summer Jam, et cetera. So
It was just spotlight after spotlight after spotlight,
every
and
few
I
months,
really feel that
major tournament.
Phil,
Yeah.
yeah, Phil and Rob running VSM, I really feel like that was the catalyst to give the game a chance to really develop, and having such a concentration of talented players all in that area, and then they started getting players would travel to come to VSM. I mean, it's like hole in the wall, a fix it shop that happens to be running MK is getting people from across the country just to come out to visit. Like, oh, we're gonna go hang out with like the Minigan brothers, but let's go to VSM. Um, and then there'll be like a tournament weekend, and they'll show up like a couple days early, and they'll come out on the Thursday, and it was the arcade feel with the consoles. It was that kind of atmosphere, and I missed that so much from the childhood of growing up with this stuff, and to have it be something that can be relevant as an adult is like mind blowing at this point.
Yeah. And it's just so crazy because when you think about you think about where our scene is now. So many players came forward. Or initially, early on in the game, if you wanted to be known, you had to travel to the Northeast. And about halfway through the game, that began to balance out because you had local scenes, be it 16-bit and Dizzy, it's Waffles, etc. over at GGA. Canada had a scene that popped up.
Yes.
Atlanta, Florida, Texas,
Yep.
California,
All the hotbeds
NorCal,
started.
SoCal, Louisiana, Texas. I mean, it was everywhere. Seattle, but it all started with the Northeast. It started with VSM. That's where it started from.
The confidence in the franchise itself. I think people are lost on the fact that the reason why there weren't MK games being played at tournaments is because nobody cared about MK. It wasn't the specific game of the time. It was the franchise itself that people didn't trust, in a sense, in that like way of like producing a competitive game that was worth traveling
Because they
for.
see Deception, Armageddon,
Yeah.
you got to have a referee with a rule book, right? To have
Yes.
a
And,
competitive
and
match. And
it's a big difference to have people playing online and getting together for online, like just like casuals, and maybe you would have an event here and there. There's something you could call a tournament. It's a big difference between that and the dedication of travel to go to an event and play for money. It's different.
yeah, of course. And like I said, it was harder for those games too because you had all these unwritten rules. You couldn't do this here,
Yeah.
you couldn't do that there. And if
It,
you played the 3D games, at least up until even into DC in some manner, you would
yeah,
literally almost need a rule book,
replay,
right? Is that legal? How many hits of that can I do? And it was like,
Oh, you did 2 volleys of that infinite.
that was you see that's a semi-infinite. He did three, two only two's allowed, and it was just
You can't run a game like that.
so
Can't do it.
and that was common knowledge, and people were like, "Ah, my God, what a joke this series is." So here you are for this. There's a literal separate MK scene being run apart from the MK scene, and to think if you guys can possibly realize out there what you have right now is as big as it is because it started with two guys running Mortal Kombat Trilogy on the PlayStation in a hotel conference room in Philadelphia.
Seedy hotel. um, I would even go far as to say it's because of two guys hanging out in the house and saying, "Let's make this game popular again." And again, for us, it was UMK3, uh, but we didn't know what was coming next. We tried every game that came out. I mean, Prophet really, really wanted to play Deadly Alliance and Deception. He enjoyed playing those games. But the fact that nobody was coming out and playing us at the tournaments, I think you guys, I don't know if maybe the two of you, but I know we played. What was it? It was NEC 3. We played the Deadly Alliance tournament.
That was
The
the
game,
last one tournament in general in UP. That was the last
yeah,
NEC, I
but
think.
that
Yeah.
game was out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was released in November. That tournament was in early December. I hadn't even touched the game, and you guys had already been playing it. So I remember somebody, who was it? Was it Alex? Who was that? Alex from Florida? Who was it? Is that
PSI? Is that who it was you thinking?
no? Who the hell was that guy? Somebody taught me some stuff with Sonya, like 10 minutes before the tournament. They're like, this combo and then this move, and you'll probably win a couple matches, and I did. Um, but yeah, Alex N. Does that sound right? Well,
Vaguely familiar.
yeah,
It
but
was so long ago. It's hard to
that
remember everybody.
was it. And then until after that, I mean, I know you guys did. It was like you and Jop or somebody did like a.
It was at one of the extravaganzas. It was at two NECs. It was at what the hell was that tournament? TIT in Texas. It had
Yes.
about 8 tournaments where it was Tekken 4, Soul Calibur 2, MK Deadly Alliance, and the 3D crowd got into it to the point that when Deception came out, the Tekken players, they were waiting for Tekken 5 to get released in North America. The DOA players were waiting. Whatever were DOA. DOA players didn't even have a scene really at the time.
Yeah.
But I was waiting for DOA 2U as well and Tekken 5. So
Mhm.
all those players kind of got it till the early MK Deception days. We played with no rules because it was a competitive community. They were just waiting for their next game. And you had, Jop or, USMC Ogre from Soul.
Mhm.
Any of you old school Tekken heads know who that is. They were all playing this game. Egg Shen from the STL scene. I think Hatman was playing it. Uh, and then, of course, when Tekken 5 came out, it was like, done. And then Mortal Kombat had its. Then it was finally just the MK guys, right? And they rebuilt their modern MK scene that way. But really, it kind of came together without the UMK scene that you just kept pushing and kept pushing. If only 3 guys came out, okay, we'll play with 3 people all night. Who cares?
Yep.
To have it build and build and build, and then finally it got to the point where you said, you know what, 3D guys, come on, it's about time. Don't you want to compete?
And it wasn't like we were just like guys who showed up to events and like played like in the hotel room and then went and like enjoyed the event. We were parts
Floor, yeah.
of multiple events that we were there for the purpose of making sure that MK had a home in the FGC. And part of my fight on like message boards, like again, we scooped up everybody from every site and put them in one place, so I didn't have to fight with the nobodies who don't care about the competitive and they only care about like fan art and like fatalities. I just want people who care about playing the games. Uh, that kind of thing just didn't exist anywhere else but the Northeast. And then when we got invited out to Ohio, it started in Ohio. It like started catching fire, but then MK9 came out and it just kind of like just hello.
No, you keep going. You're right.
Yeah. So we ran it like until the end of MK9, and then Injustice came out, and most of the MK players of old who were still playing the 2D games didn't really come out anymore. Not saying that they didn't all play Injustice, but there was a very obvious like just it was just done, and it became like this setup is just going to be at a table, and if you want to play it, you can play it. After Injustice, I mean the scene is what it is. I don't have any. I take no credit for anything else after that. But I feel that MK9's popularity, which everyone can agree, is why there's anything today, is because of what we did for 10 years in the Northeast.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much you had a ready-made players and
Hmm.
established tournament structure. So
Yep.
players are like, "Oh, I like this MK9 game," and you're like, "Well, guess what? There are
We
tournaments every whatever for it. VSM, weekly meetings. That structure of weekly meetings here,
Yep.
local tournaments, regional tournaments.
It was baked in.
Uh, you
You didn't
know,
have to build any of that stuff. You just needed players.
It was
That's it.
there. Oh, you want a tournament? We got a tournament yestercades. Oh, you want a local gathering? Well, we got this here, VSM. You want a major? Guess what? There's one every few months right here in the Northeast, and it was,
Just add
yeah,
water.
it was a big deal.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
If anybody want to know where this UMK3 story ends, obviously we know what the modern MK scene is. We have what we have now with MK11, etc. There are still scenes who are very strong. Russia has a classic MK scene. South America never died. In fact,
Never
I mean, I can tell you right now, as a guy that was probably the guy in MK4 in the arcades, the guys in South America, I still watch them play. All you guys out there who are playing MK4 and Dead, the straight up jump kick god himself, Dead, and even the guys in South America, you guys took the game to a level that we could have never taken it to. And the fact that there is this much love for the classic MK games, be it four out, UMK, etc. They play all the MKs. They still play Trilogy. They play on the N64. They play anywhere they can get it.
Whatever they can do. Whatever they can do.
With South America, Russia. Where's Dead from? Netherlands? Bulgaria. I mean, there are still scenes, and even in North America right now, you see. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm in Discord with Biggs, and he's in a tournament that's being online, being streamed on YouTube. So there are still, at least in North America, the online presence, and I think all over the world, the online presence is really, really big.
So as much as yes, like South America, and there's like the European scene overall. People still look to the U.S. as being like, what's going on with this game? Like, we're still playing it, but like, what are you guys doing, kind of? And right now, it's Ohio, ironically, where the second build of UMK3 was during the initial revival, is Drew. He's been super dedicated to UMK3. He reminds me so much of me, like in the early years. And he loves the game so much, and he puts so much of his time and effort into planning a yearly event that, I mean, it's been gaining players every year. It's not like he ran it like twice and he got like a top out, and then after that it was like, nobody cares anymore. He's increased every time, and unfortunately with COVID this year, he wasn't able to run, which really stings as a momentum killer for an event. But as soon as he can run another one, anybody who's lingering out there, you guys got to go out to his event. I'd love to go out myself. I've had some issues over the last couple of years. It's kind of limited my travel a little bit. I would like to come out there as well, but I'm telling you, if you want real competition for these old games, he runs everything that he can now. That's where you got to go. To Drusus in Ohio is the guy right now.
So, after hearing all this, some of you guys may be thinking, "Wow, what?" And it was a lot of hard work by Shock and pretty much everybody involved to really kind of get this up off the ground and work it for so many years. But I think the most important thing to realize was this is not a story so much about the people who kept it living, but it's really about every once in a while a game comes out that is just special. And it's so good that it inspires a lot of love, and that love reaches out to people and they don't allow it to die. I think no matter what happens, Mortal Kombat ever, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 has a special place, not just in MK history, but in gaming history, period.
Yeah, it's like the Savage Steamboat of Mortal Kombat history.
WrestleMania 3, don't think I don't know it.
Always, I knew you would get the reference.
Jesse the Body Ventura once said, "If Savage should split that belt in half, or the Steamboat should split the belt in half and give it to the animal right now, Gorilla." Don't think. That was a great match, by the way, man.
Yes.
That was a great match. But yeah, I want to thank you so much for joining me here. I really want to. I mean, there's so much history in the classic arcade games, and it's tough to really get it all because if you look at some documentaries, it's hard to get all the history in one place.
It gets very nuanced. Yeah, it gets very nuanced and extremely trite, I guess you could say, because having so little overall to work with, you remember everything. So it's like some things like to us that are like more important than maybe like the big win at Evo. Like to us, like I don't know if you remember the one. It was like Summer Jam or one of those events where we had that sit down with like me, you, Phil, Rob, Li Joe. We were all sitting at the
Yep.
table and we're all talking, and you're saying, and you and Li Joe are both like, this guy right here, like you're both pointing to me, saying you're saying like, this is what I've wanted for the last 4 games that nobody would do, and this is it right here, and that's boom, that was MK9.
And it really it went from the evolution and rebirth of UMK3, and the scene was already developed and there through 10 long years of just nonstop work and work and work. So
Yep.
that's where UMK3 went, and that's how MK9 was really born as far as the competitive scene. So
Yep.
yeah, it was an awesome story. Shock, I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. This was really, really cool. I hope all you guys enjoy it. I know it's a long podcast, but there's a lot of history in Mortal Kombat that it's tough. There's so much history with the arcade and the consoles, and there's so much history behind it. But I wanted to do something like this for a lot of you guys that watch that are classic MK fans. So I wanted to have this guy on here. So I really appreciate it, Shock. Thanks so much for all your time.
I appreciate you having me on.
All right, man. Take it easy, guys.
All right, talk to you soon.